Welcome back to World War Live, everybody. I'm your host, Conrad Franz, joined by a special guest, Jonathan from the Eschaton Vigil. I believe this is, if you exclude Dimitri, only our second World War live stream with a guest. So after it's appropriate too, because our previous guest was David Erhan, all about Turkish politics. So fortuitously, we have prepared for this moment. There's no one else who I would have probably asked to come on the show. It's probably between Jonathan, Father Peter, and I don't know, maybe David Patrick Harry himself. That's to get the band back together for the original groundbreaking, super popular World War III stream that we all did in the past. But I want to thank everyone for tuning in. I don't even think I really need to introduce what the stream is about, because I could have been going live every day ever since the previous stream when the Iran war has broken out. So World War is officially now, as the stream and the show has been called for many years. As Jonathan and I were talking off air, it's crazy that we've gotten to this point. When this show originally started, if there was one event that prompted it, it was America's destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline. So look how far we have come in the subsequent years since we have started this show. And Jonathan, of course, for anybody that does not know, I want to plug him really quick. I'll be sure to link it down in the description, and I'll be sure to link it in the chat. Check out his books at the eschatonvigil.org. You can check out the Eschatological Visions of the Blessed, massive tome, probably the most comprehensive work we have in English that compiles the relevant prophecies to what we're going through right now. So obviously we've consulted his work as well as much of the source material for a very long time now. So couldn't think of a better expert to have on to really, again, on Saturday, Dimitri, Isaac, and I, for 5 hours, we just covered what was happening, tried to, got a really good lay of the land, I think, for how this conflict is going to play out in the first initial hours. And now it's time to look at it from that prophetic angle. So Jonathan, thank you so much for joining the stream. How are you doing this evening?
Thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it.
No, I'm
doing well. All of this news and seeing all of this happen, in real time, seeing all the destruction and everything is unbelievable. And it only, especially during Lent and everything else, it puts things into a big perspective. And it also should give people an understanding of what's coming.
No, I think what's coming, people have been, we've gotten all sorts of detractors over the years, but I think at this point everybody is paying attention. Even those that are still skeptical, I think they're laying low for now and seeing how things play out. And of course, we all hope that peace would ultimately reign, but unfortunately, the peace that we've been experiencing ever since, you can go all the way back to World War II, when the peace really supposedly began, it hasn't been as peaceful as, I guess, the movers and shakers of the world would want us to think. We've experienced mass apostasy, mass abortion, all of these other very violent realities. So what we're really experiencing now, unfortunately, is sort of just the emergence of the violent noetic realm we've been living into reality, which is, it's really just a pulling back of the veil, because this level of violence has been occurring in the spiritual realm and even doctors' offices and homes behind the scenes. And look at the Epstein situation, right? We're going to be doing a Ether Hour this week with Anthony Westgate about some of the more esoteric side of the Epstein stuff. And I don't think it's any coincidence all this is all happening at the same time, both in that spiritual sense. So, of course, we are here discussing. If you want to ask any questions for Jonathan and I, send in a super chat. We've already got several down below. We are ready to answer and address your questions. But I guess before I read these first rounds of super chats, Jonathan, I just have to ask you, what is, you kind of gave us a hint, but what was your reaction to all of this going on, and what kind of specific there's been so many specific items. We have the F-15s being shot down. We have the closing of the Strait of Hormuz. I'm just curious, what stands out to you, and what news events that have gone down in the midst of this war have really caught your eye as an analyzer of these events?
There's so much. It's we've gotten into the information paralysis point of every, the first moment you're like, oh my goodness, and then 3 days later you're like, oh my goodness, it's still happening, it's still continuing, and it'll be like that, and then there's this period, after 3 days where everything kind of numbs out and you're like, oh well, that's still going on. And it's everything about it is tragic, but it was also to be expected. and like you said, even when the things are happening in the noetic realm and it seems peaceful on the outside, that's the opposite of what's actually in reality. And then the only thing for all of that demonic activity is to eventually become violence and death. And so yeah, I don't think there was any one particular thing that stood out during all of it. Seeing hypersonics being used, especially today, that having seen the videos of that taking place in Ukraine, and then seeing that again here, those are unbelievably frightening for anyone who is in the military or has ever seen conventional weapons. To see that is really frightening. It's also amazing at the coordination and all the different effort. I'm sure you've seen, like, the guy who did Worldview did a 4D version of the entire event of the first 24 hours of the war, and that was fascinating to watch. I watched this video earlier today of how all of it worked out, and it's really interesting because there is a delay on information. So being able to see that and how it was taking place, because we just get to see a couple videos here and there, the stuff, and it's on repeat on Instagram, but being able to see exactly how all of that took place, and then seeing Dr. Zhang's video today also puts in perspective from someone outside of the Western world who's looking at it like, this is just going to end in a complete mess. And then that brings into the perspective of, okay, well, we know they're going to go after Turkey next. We know that the Kurds are going to fight as well. We know, the CIA and whoever else is going to back the Kurds. And okay, well, there's the Kurdish state that was prophesied. Then the Turkey and probably us involving ourselves there, probably with additional nuclear weapons or F-16s or whatever capable aircraft, that gives Russia a reason to destroy Turkey. And all of these things start to really click into place that really, it makes sense, but you can't see it. And here we're beyond the timeline. We're well into it. And now we're going to start feeling the other woes, the financial woes, the economic thing, if prices of energy goes up, then the prices of everything goes up. So, everything is going to touch all of, this will affect everyone globally, especially, anyone outside of that. I was listening to someone talking about the effect that it's going to have on Japan, because they have maybe only a couple months worth of, oil. And that's something that they're required to have for all of their production. So anyways, it was just a lot. It's a lot to take in anytime something like this happens.
No, it is. And again, right, I'm going to get into y'all super chats. I see them coming in. Don't worry. But one thing I think people need to realize is, frankly, it's good we're doing this stream right now, because as we are doing this stream, we pretty much have left, I would say, the event horizon of the reality that maybe Trump might have envisioned, where some elements of the regime start to come to the table. We don't see that happening. So at this point, we are now, I believe it's 3 days away from Qatar running out of interceptor missiles, less than a week away from the UAE running out of interceptor missiles. We're already seeing the U.S. attempt to move their THAAD missile interceptors from South Korea back over into the Middle East. So again, people are saying that because these Iranian bursts of missiles the past 2 days have mostly consisted of 1 to 6 missiles, that, the Iranians must already be almost out of missiles. Nope, they're saving the bigger barrages for when the interceptors are pretty much gone. And that's not to say that it's a race against time, because the U.S. the air operations by the U.S. and Israel are effective, but they wouldn't, if they were effective enough, we wouldn't be hearing this talk about ground troops. So that's the reality.
And I heard today that the Chinese resupplied them with hypersonics, like a shipment today.
The Chinese denied it publicly, but what does that mean, right? I mean, who knows?
Yeah, and then the drone that was shot down in Cyprus was using GLONASS and some of the Russian technology, and so all of this is tied in. It's a
the rumor that the Cyprus ones came from Hezbollah, so that's yeah. We've got $5. Jonathan Kelly officially monitoring the situation. That's true. We are, if my job could be described as anything, it is monitoring the situation. So thank you, Jonathan. Your support is always double Jonathan night this evening. Jonathan Kelly here is pretty much our top super chatter. So thank you for tuning in, Jonathan. Always good to see you. We've got Paisios but nothing ever happens. Chud is swinging from the ceiling fan. Nothing ever happens. Bros on suicide watch. So true. Rip. The Chud who's becoming my friend after all these years of nothing ever happens. But alas, we knew, and I'd wager in a few weeks we'll be begging for him back. That has always been
they've taken his shoelaces.
Yeah. Jonathan Kelly, $10 more. The prophecies were wrong. I was not drinking my coffee when I learned of Israel's striking versions. I was having lobster at the spa. This must mean World War III averted. Close one. True, but again, anyone who's that Theodore Agiofarangides, his words were fulfilled back in June 2025. So we're post that at this point. And for anyone that doesn't know, Theodore Agiofarangides from Crete, Uncut Mountain Press, they are very close to releasing their Eldris Galactia book, translating all of that from Greek, and she has so much to say about World War III. So between Jonathan and Father Peter and us here at World War Now, we've really got the central node of kind of what I consider the Orthodox analysis of everything going on here. So thank you all for tuning in. We have Aaron Hart, shekels for the cause, all eyes on Turkey and Erdogan. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me, a sinner. That's true. I think that's where we're going to go next after these super chats, is what is going to go on with Erdogan and how exactly are things developing on the Iraqi, Turkish, Iranian border, because that seems to be where the first ground operations of this war are really going to be taking place, excluding Lebanon, where ground operations are already well underway, of course. We have $10 from Matthew Jenkins. Do we know what will happen to the industrial system after the war? Will we still use gasoline cars, diesel trucks, and electricity, or will we go back to pre-industrial times? I think that's a good question. And I think the real answer is it sort of depends on where you live is one of the main things, and it will depend on we know that even outside of the prophecies, from just a conspiracy perspective, we know that they've been phasing out normal conventional gas vehicles with good V6 solid normal engines. So I know you probably even know more about the prophecy side of this aspect than even me, Jonathan. So what are your thoughts on this question?
I don't have anything specific on prophecies regarding what type of energies we'll be using after the fact, but something did happen recently that put me in a different mindset of really what's going on. So we had a huge snowstorm here in Nashville, and we had almost 400,000 people without power. And my house, our street, was hit almost the most severe portion of that. Every tree in our entire neighborhood, there were trees laying, it took us 3 days just to get down the hill from where we live. We have about less than 20 families on the street. It's a dead end. And we were without power for 12 days. And I've got 2 small children and a wife, and that put a lot of that in perspective. I'm someone who I feel very well prepared, but when you have no electricity, and we have, gas heat and different things, gas fireplace, I had kerosene heaters, it's still not very comfortable. Even when, the temperature is negatives outside and there's really not much you can do, power's out completely, and it stays that way. Like it doesn't come back on for 2 weeks. So all that food that you had in your fridge that you thought, oh, well, we'll just get snowed in. We'll go to Costco, did a Costco run before it got crazy, and then thought, oh, it'll be fine. Nope, all gone, because what you can't put outside that's not going to get completely frozen. So that put a lot of that into perspective about this, post American chaos or whatever takes place. There's a lot more about being prepared during that situation. And then also your churches, and because we didn't have liturgy, none of the churches here had liturgy during that time, at least for the first week, because it was, no one could get anywhere. The entire place was stopped. And so our metropolitan, said we weren't doing liturgies, and that's something else to consider during some type of strife. Right now stuff's getting bombed left and right in Jerusalem, and they're still having their liturgies. That's a different situation, but something they're almost used to at this point, probably. So, anyways, just thinking about that, I consider myself a prepper of sorts, having some type of system, and then a backup system for whatever that looks like, for anything that you're using, would be helpful.
No, I very much agree. And we had a snowstorm, ice storm here in Austin, and Texas is even less prepared for snow than Tennessee. And we, of course, every church in the area shut down except one, the Romanians. They stayed open, and I got in my four-wheel drive vehicle and schlepped as many people as we could fit in there. And we were, you know, me and my friends were five of 17 of 12 people there. So we made it happen. But yeah, I mean, who knows what's going on? I mean, in Iran, they're even still doing liturgy. St. Nicholas Russian Orthodox Cathedral, they're still doing liturgies despite them. I mean, Tehran is just it's smoke filled. It's like the apocalypse there. So it's getting crazy to say the least. But we have $5. I'm gonna have to roast my boy here because this is a cringe comment. But $5, half of missile launchers destroyed. No sign of Fatah 2s being used. Missile launch numbers already down. Airspace controlled by the U.S. Time to noon. Total nonsense. Obviously, the prophecies themselves say nothing about Iran necessarily winning this war. The idea that they lose is that's completely within the realm of possibilities here, which I think is regrettable because I view the Ayatollah as perhaps a somewhat respectable statesman as opposed to Netanyahu and the clowns that we, of course, support. But as far as the airspace being controlled by the U.S., that's just Israeli propaganda. You could probably say Western Iran, his airspace is pretty much controlled, and even Tehran is probably pretty much disputed. But I think it was 12 hours ago we saw Iranian jets still in the sky. So you can't if the other people can still take off jets, that is not air superiority, let alone the fact that there's still drones and missiles. But as far as the drone, again, when was it? I believe it was also within less than 24 hours. Larjani and the head of the IRGC, or the current one after the other ones have been assassinated, said we did not use our biggest weapons in this initial barrage. But again, they could get blown up. Who knows? But that's if I were a betting man, based on the responses of the military and how they seem to have not been as prepared. They didn't. The Iranian response does seem to have surprised them, not necessarily in scale, but in how many different bases across the Middle East were struck. So that is a very interesting reality. You're muted, Jonathan, by the way. But we have $5 from Steven Sterling. Are we ever getting that prepper video, i.e., what to stock, what skills to learn? I've already started a garden, and I'm connected with my monastery. Well, Jonathan, if you want that, you got to sign up for Eschaton Vigil because that's their specialty. Not that we might not do a show on it in the future, but we're the information hub, the prep and stuff. I know Jonathan's more on that than even I am, but I am also prepared, lest anyone be watching thinking they can come, I don't know, raid my stock or something. Don't think it would be so easy.
That's right. Prepare spiritually first, and physically if you can, and that's really having a good network is worth more than anything else. And then,
yeah, Stephen, you said you were connected with the monastery. That's
the place to
I'd
be.
wager they know how to prepare physically and spiritually as well. So
something you mentioned about the Iranian response. It's interesting. I personally haven't studied much on how all of their military is organized and things like that. So for the last couple of days, that's been a big interest. Intel on how all of this happens. And something very fascinating is that they have a fully, even though you have different leadership and things like that, and we've apparently taken out several hundred of whoever would have been in those leadership positions, there are hundreds of other people, and they're handled in a decentralized way, so that it's not relying on, hey, one person's going to say hit the button and now you got 15 different launch platforms or whatever else. They're actually autonomous in their region or area. They're able to send whatever and have some form of communication. I know we have a massive blackout on communications and things like that, but I found that interesting. That's something that we as Americans, especially considering our warfare doctrine, we have maneuver doctrine, which doesn't work in asymmetric warfare, and now we really don't have any concept of how to fight a strong asymmetric war. We aren't doing a very good job of it. We didn't learn anything, I guess, from Afghanistan, and what's taking place in Ukraine is also a part of that. Like, we used to have trench warfare as a part of our doctrine for infantry. It was battle drill number one was clearing a trench. That got taken out, I think, in the 80s and never replaced. So those are things that are coming back in full force, learning these different types of methodologies and how things are handled. And you're looking at two totally different theaters that are being handled completely differently, where U.S. is so stuck in this in a situation where we were using large scale munitions that cost a ton of money, and the whole idea of commercial off the shelf equipment and things with cheap Timu, whatever, that can cause damage to some $1 million equipment. We just don't have a process to handle that.
Yeah, and again, the Iranian military structures, they describe it as as a mosaic structure where, again, all we've achieved right now with these strikes, I'm sure, again, some of these were capable commanders. I'm sure it's a loss, but fundamentally, the only real objective we've achieved is not that we've disabled any of the individual missile technological capabilities. We've simply, the only thing that now can't happen is they can no longer be stopped. That's the one thing that can't happen. That's what a centralized person, any of these commanders that have been killed, they would have had the authority to get on the airwaves, to get on the channels and tell the lower guys all across these, like, hey, stop, time to negotiate. Those people no longer exist. So all these people are carrying out predetermined doctrines and plans that are going to continue because they are no longer communicating, like you said, with anybody probably outside of their immediate vicinity or with even a hardline radio wire. So that's what's going on right now. So this idea that the degradation of these, again, our military propaganda in the media is using this to put it for victory, probably because they realize this is going to go on longer than we think. So we need to hype up all of the wins that we have right now. But once this keeps going on and keeps dragging out, we're going to see exactly how that goes. And look, Trump seems to be convinced that there are people within the current regime that will want to come forth and negotiate. Reza Pahlavi, of course, the exiled former, son of the former monarch, he's rallying the troops, trying to get everyone to get him in. Trump doesn't seem to prefer him. I don't know who Trump seems to have his eye on. I've heard some people say that Larjani is an MI6 spy. He's gone pretty far into bombing UK bases for an MI6 spy. But look, if we see in a week or two that some of these actors are trying to come to the table for negotiations, we might be able to start to deduce who is compromised. Our Iranian opposition and exterior media, so not exactly the most trustworthy, not state media in Iran, are reporting that Ayatollah Khamenei's son has been elected as the new Ayatollah. I have not seen official confirmation of that, so I'm not reporting it as such. But
I think I heard
again,
that he was killed. Is that?
No, not his, not the main son,
Not his
who
son?
has been
Okay.
considered. It was his wife. Of course, they killed his 14-month-old granddaughter, but not the politically, which is suspicious. Maybe this is the guy they want to take power. But again, in theory, this guy would be unhappy with the fact that his entire family and extended family were just murdered by these regimes. So Trump has said that is quote unquote worst case scenario, that a worse guy as he said, a worse guy than Khamenei gets back in office, which I don't know why he would be saying that as a possibility if it weren't actually possible. So that's where we see a lot of this potentially going. But
Yeah, there's no filter.
yeah, and I guess as we continue on here, what is your perspective on everything going on with Turkey? Because, of course, the prophecies, the next stage we all kind of see coming is Erdogan's fall. He's not a young man. He's not super, super old. He's not Ayatollah old. That's the thing. All these people dunking on the Ayatollah, it's like, he was an 86-year-old man, right? So the idea that somehow we snuffed his life short and really, really, he's going to be a lot more powerful of a figure in memoriam now that you've killed him than he would have been if he had passed away from cancer or whatever it was that he likely was suffering from. So that's the reality there. But as this next upcoming event of Erdogan's potential fall is upon us, I think this news about how American boots on the ground or even other on the ground operations are going to unfold in the next few weeks, they're all tying in, because the Kurds are the faction that America, the CIA are arming, speaking of which the CIA has had to evacuate all of its regional bases due to a direct hit from Iranian drones on their headquarters in Dubai. So big update there. But the situation with the Kurdish thing, it seems that they're trying to create operational control, total air superiority, as well as clearing the ground in Iranian Kurdistan, on the border with Iraqi Kurdistan, so that these Kurdish fighters, I believe all of the 5 major Kurdish militia groups have been put together into one central planning board. Trump has now been arming and funding them explicitly. He's communicated with their leadership directly. So that seems to be the first attempt at a ground incursion. Reports indicate that the IRGC ground forces have already begun to accumulate, and I haven't heard of any massive strikes. I haven't even heard of any strikes by the Israelis and Americans that have killed more than actually like 30 or 40 troops at once. The biggest strikes that killed anyone have still been that strike on those schoolgirls that killed 150 people. So
There were supposedly 90 people killed in Qom.
Yes. but we still haven't seen what
Yeah.
we would consider a massive killing of a accumulated ground force, which who knows, that might be coming in the next few hours as all this is going on. But we're going to be watching that very closely. What are your thoughts on the Turkish Kurdish angle of all of this?
The Naftali speech was pretty that's prescient. I almost couldn't believe it was spoken though. Just as soon as I started looking for things. So 3 days ago, there were maybe 4 articles that you could find on this for media saying, "Oh, maybe Turkey is the next issue. Maybe, well, they're bothering us in Syria now. They're trying to be in Gaza. Maybe we're going to have some issues with it." And then today, there's hundreds, which is just the advent of the dissemination of all of this information. How all of that happened so rapidly during all of this because they're not going to stop this. We're going to be in this for months, right? If not, well, who knows how all of this goes? But that whole region is going to be destabilized, and so Turkey is probably going to have an opportunity to be involved in some way. We already have nuclear capable weapons there. If we were to stage more nuclear capable weapons, jets, Russia has said that's a big line for them, and that would give Russia a reason to bomb and attack and take care of Turkey in their way. So it seems to me that the play is Israel is going to take out Erdogan and in some way, shape, or form, and whoever replaces him will allow the U.S. to put their whatever there, and then that will piss off the Russians, and then they'll decide, okay, well, if you're going to do that, we're just going to get rid of all of it. And that also ties in with Finland because Finland has a air base where we've sent nuclear capable jets, and again, Russia said, hey, that's a no-go. So you have these things that line up perfectly once you start seeing it. The whole region is going to be embroiled in this, and then eventually the world. But Turkey is definitely, I think it's closer. This is where you get into the idea of creating a timeline and things that we don't have a concept of. We were talking about this before, and I'm working on some other publications. One of these is specifically commentary on Revelation and using from the saints. There's a great collection already available for Orthodox, but a 5-book set. But there's not really much else. It's pretty limited. There's a ton of stuff from the Protestant world. It's all jumbled nonsense. And so coming from a Protestant background, I had this mindset, like I was mentioning earlier, and that, oh, well, the switch flips and then Revelation happens. Like it was just, that was how I had viewed that. And it's much, Orthodoxy has everything historical. Everything has this timeline. Everything is a part of this. It's not just this one thing. And something I found recently that going over things that's been stuck in my head, like I mentioned earlier, I'd like to read something, a quote here, because this still is so important. This is from a book, Armageddon Apocalypse, a Greek book. And it says, in 1986, Elder Paisios was alive in this world, and he was saying, quote, there in the apocalypse, the holy theologian John records that he saw a great star burning, falling from heaven, polluting, embittering, and mortally poisoning the waters from the sources of the waters and the sources of waters. And the name of the star, Wormwood, in Ukrainian, Chernobyl. Those who are still waiting for some star to fall from the sky have been deceived. It is never going to happen. They will understand that this has already taken place. This is something that's just blowing my mind. It is never going to happen. They will understand that this has already taken place. So for me, coming from this Protestant background, as so many of the converts are, you're thinking, wait a minute, we're already in the book. We're deep in it. This is third trumpet, right? And you have several more things that are going to take place. But as I've gone through some of this, the saints have also made declaration that the fourth trumpet took place in 2010, that the fifth, the locusts, actually have to do with demonic impressions on the soul and all the activity and things going on, and that the sixth, being the 200 million people army, we're not that far away. We're well into this. It's not like something that, of course, rapture and any of that nonsense. This is, we're living this out. All of this was told to us, just like the saints mention all of the more specific prophecies, but we're well in this timeline. So things are happening. I can't imagine the Israelis taking their foot off the gas. Maybe should we even say that? Let's just call them, the chicken slingers, or whatever other Satanists.
I've just been saying the Jews, but
the Overton window has gone so far.
I'm thinking that maybe YouTube has, they've had, I think there's just so many people that watch this content that they've put the fingers off the gas a little bit. But I've been a little careful, especially recently, because now my streams are getting hundreds and hundreds of viewers because of everything going on. So I should probably be a little bit careful. But at the very least, the Substack live stream will always be up. We know we can say it on there. So if it ever goes down on YouTube, just head right over to worldwarnow.co, which, what a seamless transition into my shilling of the Substack, which here you guys go, worldwarnow.co. If you go check it out, if you go here, the live stream is also happening right now, but we have our 5-hour live stream that Dimitri and I did there. We have our recent stream about the growth of Orthodoxy in America with Cleave to Antiquity. We have our episode prior to the war, where you can see our stunningly accurate predictions leading up to what went down. And if you get behind the paywall, which is that is the best way to support the show right now, you can click the Ether Hour tab here and you can see all of our paywall content. Our previous episodes with Jonathan are back here. You can see our episodes with Father Peter Here's all about the situation between the EP and the Pope. You can see my interview with Metropolitan Mitrofan of Gorlovka from the frontline city of Gorlovka in the Donbass. You can see our discussion about Rasputin with Rasputin Archive, who is in the comments of this stream tonight. Our episode with Dr. Matthew Raphael Johnson, who is a tremendous resource, somebody we've cited very often on the show. A recent episode with Andrei Afanasiev, and so much more. So thank you all so much for tuning in. And World War Now is obviously linked down below. So send in a super chat if you want Jonathan and I to answer any more questions. But if you already want to do more than that, get behind the paywall at worldwarnow.co. It's a fantastic resource that I've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into, all waiting for, frankly, moments just like this. The only other comparable moments to what's going on right now I can think of were, October 7th was big, obviously. The 6-Day War was big. The Prigozhin events were big, but I think this one is ultimately the biggest one so far since the beginning of the show, and I do not say that lightly. So I want to thank everyone that's been along for the ride, and I thank everyone that is just tuning in for the first time. Much like, what does it say? Even at the 11th hour, like you hear from the Paschal homily of St. John Chrysostom, everyone is equal here in that regard, except me. I'm in charge, but just kidding, everybody. But a lot of updates going on right now. Again, the barrages continue to fly in from Iran. The situation in all of these other countries is, Bahrain got hit so hard. I'm shocked that of all the places, it's the smallest one of all. It's smaller than New York City in area, and it has just been pounded. Some of the strikes there have been crazy. Dubai as well, which I am no fan of the Emiratis, so that is perfectly cool with me. I think one of the biggest surprises, and even the Israelis have expressed surprise at this point, is how Ansar Allah, the Houthis, have not entered the conflict really yet. That's interesting. I don't know if they're waiting for, I don't know if they are communicating with elements of the Iranian regime and they're sort of saving a trump card. Maybe their powers were so depleted by the wars that have been waged on them the past few years that they want to wait for a specific moment. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, as well as what you think the future of Israel is in general. Because St. Paisios did prophesy a sort of the end of the Israeli state as we currently are aware of it. And I was even seeing Elder Gabriel the Athonite, one of St. Paisios' spiritual children. He said 3 major events need to unfold before kind of the big, the Russo-Turkish war, these other big things that we understand, possibly the big the natural disasters that might strike here in the United States, for that to go down. He said the first event was, I believe it was the attack, the flattening of Gaza. The second was the strike on the Iranian nuclear capabilities. And the third will be the death of Erdogan. So we're 2/3 of the way through this sort of mini timeline that I think is what we could probably describe as stage one of World War III in the popular imagination. But in reality, we're well into stage two of World War III in the timeline of Elder Joseph of Atopedi. And if you take Metropolitan Neophytos, we are about in year 6 of World War III. So that is that's where we're at right now. I'd love your thoughts on all that.
Yeah, there is a sequence of events for sure, and we have been given those like an incredible roadmap, and it is shocking that there are still people like, well, I don't know. Especially when you go back, and I've got 1,400 years of prophecies that describe everything in incredible detail down to this. I mean, even I think is that um, um, Aristocles from Moscow. He discussed what would take place. He mentioned Chernobyl, even the rebirth of Russia being on the explosion on the banks of a river. All of these things have been given to us, and it seems silly to not pay attention. We've got several phases of this, but again from Elder Gabriel, he shows that when the third thing happens, be ready, right? And that's the fall of Erdogan. So however that takes place, and I think it was Elder Galactia who says that he would be bloody. So there's something to look at with that. Like I said, I don't think the Israelis are going to take their foot off the gas. I think all of this is going to push in one way or another. I think this will give the Greeks an opportunity for the expansion of the waters. I mean, all of this ties in so perfectly, and Turkey taking Chios, Lesbos, and Rhodes, or having some type of deal with that because of what's going on here. Because originally, in 2024, I was thinking about these things independently. I really wasn't seeing, okay, well, this is going to happen, then this. But really, if you look at it now, okay, well, we've got airspace issues, we've got sea space issues. The whole theater is now embroiled in this. That gives everybody a perfect reason to have some of these things take place. Greece and the territorial waters, as well as Turkey saying, "Oh, well, we need these islands to be able to, defend or attack or whatever takes place there." So you really have, Erdogan, the Turkey and Greece conflict, which explains why, I believe one of the, it might be Vadapedi, Elder Joseph's discussion, where I think he says a French carrier would be involved, and they would sink Turkish ships. And it's like, well, why would a French carrier? Well, guess what? One just went to the Med. So all these things are tying together, and then that, of course, tying into what we were discussing with Russia and Turkey, whether it's because of Americans having nukes there, however, and that doesn't even get to America. We apparently have our own problems, which if anyone is familiar, I'm sure everyone's paying attention. If they're paying attention to the war, they're paying attention to everything else taking place. And I'm a software developer by trade. I build all kinds of software, financial software, defense software. And one of those things that's happened basically in the last month or two has been just how accelerated AI development is. And the idea that you can, it started as okay, well, maybe I've got like this agent that can help me code. Last year around April, I was seeing how that could help. Now I'm producing software at an incredible pace, entire huge amounts of software. This last week, I was able to produce a full parody system, Palantir Gotham, for defense, that like all of these different things, just like the other gentleman who produced the World Viewer or whatever it's called, and then the all of those things are available at a rate, which means people and the necessity for them to be doing work, how this is affecting the stock market. Every time Claude or any of the things in the AI companies have an update, it affects our stock market. We're wiping off billions every time there's a new update, because they just realized that this moat that was produced by software as a service, which is a huge category for our GDP, is basically, there's a way to get around it or produce stuff that took them decades. Now we can produce it in a matter of hours. So we definitely have something going on financially, and even outside of the economic woes of the Japanese bond market and everything going on there. So we have something. What lights that spark and how that happens, who knows? But this also goes back to there's a bunch of discussion about earthquakes. Well, so every time there's an earthquake, I've got alerts set for different stuff, and I'm thinking, okay, but again, we may not be thinking about this in the right way. It may not be specifically an earthquake. It could be any number of things that create such an eruption, and or geologic, and it's mentioned that it's geologic, so we can assume that some portion of it is. But could it be caused by something military? Could it be the tsunami missiles, or there's so much to all of this now that you can actually see how it could happen. Whereas just a couple of years ago, in the midst of the post-COVID, this is wild. Well, now it's like, okay, I can see all the little pieces, and this is starting to get much more realistic. And then to look at the scale of what we're dealing with now, you're embroiling the entire region. So all the GCC nations are being affected, and maybe some of it is from Iran, but there's probably some portion of Israeli, some form of sabotage taking place to affect certain, specific changes that they're looking for. And of course, that's kind of their SOP. So if you look at it, we're in the midst of it, but who you're getting information from, where all of this comes from, there's competing views on who and what, and the beauty of orthodoxy in most terms is the both and. Well, yes, there's an economic value to us doing this, but there's also all of this other, Zionist, Satanist, cabal, spirituality that's affecting it as well.
No, I mean the market situation. I mean, we're probably gonna have Cameron McGregor on later this week, and he's really analyzing what's going on there, and he sees a lot of major disruption. And I mean, who knows? I mean, even to the point where Israel is expediting some of this, like you mentioned. I mean, Iran didn't even. Or I don't know if I believe this, but Iran claims they weren't even behind the strikes on Saudi Aramco. So if that was Israel or somebody else, what's going on? What's the end game here? Because clearly, if that's going on, it's about a whole lot more than even turning Iran into a barren wasteland, which is obviously a major key here. We have $5 from Stephen Sterling. Is JTG familiar with the tradition that Ireland will be sunken beneath the sea 7 years before the arrival of the Antichrist by St. Patrick's prayers? Your thoughts?
I'm familiar. I have read that. I haven't tied that into everything going on here because I don't have additional sources. It's even though it's in English, there's just not there's not enough for me to tie it together with some of these things. You have dozens of saints who've put these notes together and made specific prophecies about what's going on. So,
even with St. Paisios, you have to be careful because there's all sorts of things people have made up over the years. And St. Patrick lived so long ago that you got to be doubly careful because that's we don't know anyone that knew him. So we have to.
That was one of the biggest troubles. Is there's about I'd say half of the St. Paisios stuff on the internet is a maybe. So, obtaining those original texts and going through them and verifying, hey, okay, they're on this page. This is what this says. Okay, now we can, put some context to it. That was probably one of the more difficult tasks. The Greek texts are not as readily available as a lot of the Russian texts, although there's some that have been digitized. The Mount Athos has a great library collection online that you can go on and read, and that I gained so much stuff from there, and was able to find the actual titles of some of these documents, and then go find them, and actually bought several on eBay. I know there are a couple of St. Cosmas books that are available that are in Greek only, that kind of go through some of this stuff, and to be able to put all those together and make sure that that's an accurate thing. So yeah, if I've got maybe some more sources on some of Ireland. Now there is well, I have a lot of guesswork. Right? I have a lot of stuff that I've found, but I can't source appropriately. And if I can't source it, I try to just put it aside.
And yeah, that's what a lot of this is. It's a lot of the perpetual research. I mean, I remember when I first started seeing the version of the Saint or the Elder Theodore Agio-Ferrangiti's prophecy about that fateful Friday morning
Mhm.
element of it, and that was about 3 months before when I started seeing people talking about that in Greek or just Greek channels that I follow and translating from. I started seeing that about 3 months before the 12-Day War, and I was
Mhm.
like, "Oh, is this true?" I looked it up, and I saw there was. I looked up there was an actual book that you could say that had this in it. I'm like, okay, this seems to be something legitimate. And what ended up happening? It would happen on on that fateful Friday morning. So that's a perfect example of how you want to be careful on these kinds of things. And there are certain traditions that at a certain level, like you said, you don't want to be publishing things that you don't know about. I mean, the only way you're going to know some of those things, whether it's true or not, is when it happens. And if it happens a certain way, then be like, okay, that was clearly
Yeah.
clearly made up. We have $5 from Aaron. Our heart here. He said, "Would you go over the USA related prophecies?" Of course, I have a majorly American audience, so everyone always wants to hear about what's going to happen in America. And I always tell them, unfortunately, because we don't have that many saints, it's not the focus of a huge amount of the prophecies. And frankly, if it wasn't for Elder Ephraim and Eldris Galactia, there'd be even less about it. But there are obviously mentions of it. So when someone asks you this question, where do you go?
Well, I've put most of those together. I do have a collection specific on America that I keep and I'm happy to share. But it's this is one of those topics that requires a lot of spiritual understanding as well, because there nothing good happens. Let's put it that way. This is a very dark doomer, dark, black pill kind of discussion once we get into America. And but I'm happy to read some of those, and if people are interested.
Yeah, what is because we hear a lot about the West Coast sort of sinking into the ocean in some
Mhm.
capacity. We hear
Mhm.
about again, some of these natural disasters that are supposed to come. We hear, I mean, Eldris Galactia, she says, like, she's just like, whoa, woe to America, how terrible, what's going to happen there. And it seems to be a combination of natural disasters as well as major economic crisis being sort of centered on the United States, which of course would have
Mhm.
innumerable number of negative effects. So maybe Jonathan, feel
Yeah,
free to read some that people might find not necessarily just the most dramatic ones, but maybe ones that
sure.
people might find the most relevant.
Yeah. Starting as early as 1918 with Saint Aristocles, sorry, I'm um, Aristocles of Moscow. He has two quotes that are very specific. One, America will feed the whole world, but in the end, it will collapse. And another, in the heart of North America, a giant volcano explodes and causes a terrible state of emergency. The explosion will cause a very strong earthquake, and the water, the air, the earth will be poisoned. Neither the beast nor the bird nor the man can live longer in the contaminated earth for a long time. So both of those, again, it only gets worse from there. So it sounds to me, giant volcano or explosion, strong earthquake, that and poisoning of air and water. It could be, there's a lot of discussion about Yellowstone. There's thoughts on. We have also the New Madrid Fault, which is here in Tennessee on the Mississippi River. Both of those are overdue in some geologists' eyes for something horrible, but it could also be, you know could some of our nuclear facilities be hacked and create an explosion? Any number of things like that could take place. So just bearing some of that in mind. um, Elder Vasilios says, he reposed in 91, says, and here in Greece, we will have a lot of bad things, but not like those in America. America will go out. Do you hear? It will turn off. It will not have life at all. Not here, not there, not at all. It will turn off from weather phenomena, from disease, from vengeance of other countries, because they are the cause of the evil that happens to humanity. The worst will happen. Why did they not repent? He also has a second quote that says, the American wants to squeeze the Russian, but in the end, he will pay dearly. America will become partial. And here we will have many bad things, certainly not those of America. America will die out. It will have no life at all. It will be extinguished by natural phenomena because of the evils it causes to humanity. So two different books, different translations. St. Porphyrios mentions, and this was actually mentioned, I believe, when Patrick had Father Peter Hears on his show. I have his testimonies right here, St. Porphyrios the Prophet, the 3-volume. And in it, he says, when a black president takes over the governance of the United States of America, then their destruction will approach. So that leading up to this destruction. Of course, we have a bunch from St. Paisios that includes, we don't expect anything good from the West. The sun continues for so many years to go to the West, and still it has not brightened, but it is getting dark. Everything is ruled by God's word, but not the Americans or the Jews. They prevail once because God allows it to discipline his people. Skipping ahead a little bit. I know you've mentioned the America's like a fox walks with all 4 legs, and the day will come when all 4 legs will be trapped in the traps that she set for others. I think you've mentioned that on your podcast. America will be frightened by the power of Russia, and we'll fear it. And then we have Jonas Kalaides. He mentions, he reposed in 2009, first, something will happen that will bring America to its knees. She will cease to be a superpower. Russia will be a superpower, and then the events will happen. Great harm will come to America. America will suffer a great geological, biological disaster for the disasters that they have caused, the unjust death of so many innocent people. Elder Joseph Vadapini, America will be completely destroyed. 90% of its citizens will be killed. St. Charalampus had prophesied that Russia would become a world superpower for 5.5 months, but in the end, it would be defeated by the Americans. However, they won't find hands to applaud. Essentially, it will not exist, as the ground will be turned into one immense cemetery. Elder Jonah, the wind will blow the dollars along the road like autumn leaves, and no one will chase them. They will be like cheap pieces of cheap paper.
Hyperinflation. You mentioned about the mention of the Jews of America. One of the prophecies that I've always found the most relevant and prescient, especially to even people with a very basic geopolitical understanding, was when St. Paisios said, someone asked him, will there be a world war? Will NATO strike the Poles, the Czechoslovaks, and the Belarusians? And will the Russians attack the Germans? The elder shook his head and said, everyone will abandon the Russians and side with the Jews of America. The Russians will burn them. And that is... he said that when the Soviet Union still existed. So the idea that all of those groups would turn on the Russians, that it wouldn't have even made any sense. But that's exactly what we're experiencing now. Everybody except the Russians and then the Belarusians and other people that be considered Russian have sided against them. We have $5 here from Jonathan Kelly. Greek defense of Cyprus following strikes will trigger Turkish direct conflict ? And who knows? I mean, that's one thing that could definitely happen if Turkey and Israel get into a conflict, then undoubtedly if there's Greek troops off of Cyprus, that would be a major thing. However, the prophecies do say that when those things start to go off, the Turks will be forced to withdraw from Cyprus, and Cyprus will actually be relatively peaceful. They'll experience some small unsettlement and a slap, but they will largely be experiencing peace in the midst of the craziness going on just to their north. So anything you have on Cyprus, and that would be fascinating. It's always been one of the most interesting parts of the conflict for me. I've been to Cyprus. I've met Metropolitan Neophytos there, and seeing, Larnaca Airport had alarms going off, came under potential attack recently. And of course, we saw the drones that were down there that, as far as I'm aware, seem to have come from Hezbollah. So anything you have on Cyprus, and that would be, that's one of the most interesting elements of it to me.
Actually, when I just searched for Cyprus, I have a dozen Metropolitan Neophytos' interviews, so it's usually his discussion. It seems like, yeah, it's everything from him. I believe there's something from the Prophecies of Blessed Maria, but it's more about in 1974, and then Saint Gennadios pops up, and I don't remember what was said about Cyprus from him, but I think it might be.
Well, and Cyprus technically being the largest Greek island, I mean, we know Crete supposedly will fall to the Turks at one point as the second largest Greek island, and that's relevant because Eldris Galactia, Elder Theodore Agiopharangides, they are from Crete. I mean, even Saint Andrew of Crete from hundreds and hundreds of years ago, who we read, of course, his great canon, and so many of the prophecies, even from Saint Cosmas and Saint Paisios, fundamentally have their roots in what Saint Andrew of Crete was saying. So obviously you know all this, Jonathan, but that's as far as where people say like, oh, so what, you have all these new random prophecies, you're no different than like the Mormons and like all of these restorationist cults.
No.
It's like, no, this is we're sticking to the traditions that we have been taught. Saint Paisios is, again, not all of it, there are some quote unquote newer revelations about the specifics of his time, but fundamentally it's all based on the tradition of Saint Cosmas, which is based on the tradition of Saint Andrew, which have been based on many other traditions, fundamentally going all the way back to Jesus Christ himself. So that is that's how that goes.
I do have a mention from Saint Gennadios. It says, first, the Lord will permit a world war because the world does not repent, and the war will be this war will be the last, as the destruction will be total. A small state will be the cause of the world war. This state might be Cyprus. When the flood of Noah happened, people drowned in the waters, and now they will drown in blood. And it continues on about the sky filling with airplanes dropping bombs on people, discussing St. Cosmas and the sea will be turned red from the blood of slaughtered people. The 3-year-old calf will float in it, and it goes on. The Turks will attack us crossing the Evros, causing all kinds of destruction. They'll reach as far as the 6 miles, Thessaloniki, Corinth, and then we'll counterattack with the help of other nations, the Russians, and they'll chase the Turks back, and continues on. It's also interesting about the Sunni Shia and their diaspora, and how we talk about the red apple and Mecca, and kind of how that would be that they would flee into some place. And I didn't realize I had not realized until today just how the Sunni and the Shia were so disproportionate. I at some point in my head, I thought, oh, it's probably 75-25 or something like that, and really it's just Iran and a couple other little places. And so all of this kind of ties back to Turkey and the Erdogan Caliphate and pushing all of their Satanist nonsense. This connects in a way that 1/3 of the Turks will be killed, 1/3 will be chased to the red apple tree, and the remaining will become Christian. And that's just an interesting portion of how the these different populations, including the Kurds and whatnot, are kind of changing. The dynamics of everything changes once these borders are now a little fuzzier, especially because I don't think Iran is going to have the same borders that it had prior to this. It would be surprising if they continued that. I think, portions of Iraq and whatever else, it seems that it would only make sense. This is a part of the greater Israel project, and there's probably all of this area will look very different here soon.
No, 100%. And people asked earlier about some of the energy stuff and all of that. And we have prophecies about how you should have a donkey because you're not going to have gas for your car, how you're going to have to travel very great distances to
buy 2 guns
and to see other people. Yeah, buy 2 guns.
And that's from the 1700s, right? So
yeah, I mean, that's from St. Cosmas. So one up and retain another. So, and again, and much is image is revelation, right? Because so much of Revelation was fulfilled in the early days with the destruction of the temple, but some of it still applies to what has yet to happen, which again, a lot of what St. Cosmas said was fulfilled in the Greek War for Independence and many of these other episodes, but that doesn't mean it isn't still also going to be doubly fulfilled here when it happens here in the later days. You have to understand, I mean, this is sort of just understanding how to read like biblical literature and prophetic literature and these other sorts of things, which most people just think it's like a newspaper. That's the prophecies say that it will be like watching the TV, not that it is watching the TV. So
And
it's
we are all monitoring the situation.
yeah, we are very much monitoring the situation, to say the least. And of course, the Kurdish situation, which again, you mentioned the borders of Iran. I think I would wager there, and Kurds and Azerbaijanis are going to be kind of the two main groups. Maybe the Balochis down on the border with Pakistan. And again, Pakistan and Afghanistan are still, fighting in the midst of all of this. So there's a lot going on. But of course, I've read it a million times on the show recently. I think most people are well familiar with it. But the words from Metropolitan Neophytos about Kurdistan recently are just so relevant and fascinating. He talks about how, where does it say here? He says, the Jews want allies. Their great ally they feel in the Mediterranean Sea is the Greeks, the mainlanders in Cyprus. And in the east, it will be the so-called Kurdish state. 40 million, mind you, are the Kurds. So America is promoting them. And finally, we will have a clash of the Jews with Turkey. It says, what does America want? America does not want under any circumstances to lose Turkey from the Western camp. And it goes on to say it can't control Erdogan, and this will ultimately lead to the meeting to get rid of Erdogan himself. So Metropolitan Neophytos says that once you hear about the Kurdish state, then you will know that things are really happening. And so I think between the emergence of a Kurdish state, the fall of Erdogan, which people said in the comments already, I likely think that Erdogan will invade the Greek islands. In the midst of that, he will fall somehow, and then the secularists will have to pick up the pieces from that, and then they will be used. They basically, I think the West will give them a pass in the sense that, look, we're not going to get mad at you guys for what you did to Greece. Depends. I mean, at this point, we'll probably also see a change in government in Greece, because it says that the Greek government will not respond to it properly, and it's probably going to be, I don't know, some other junta kind of situation. And then at that point, we're starting to get into John Vatatzis territory with, speaking of the icon behind Jonathan's head, but I think in that regard, we will see that's how the secularists might come to power, will be in the midst of that. Because look, even though Erdogan and the secularists both hate Greece the same amount, Erdogan, I could see him more likely doing something like that. And then when he falls, that would precipitate these same events. But it's like you said, Jonathan, some people that kind of view all these things independently. And it's like, well, if one thing doesn't happen and then the other thing doesn't happen, and those aren't all the main news headlines, then I'm not going to believe that this is happening. But fundamentally, these things happen in these chaotic situations that are sort of created. Like, I understood that when the Russia-Ukraine war became this attritional war that was going to go on forever, I understood that fundamentally it's basically being kind of put on ice to become this other element of this other Middle Eastern war that's going to happen. And of course, that ties into the big kind of heuristic prophecy, which is this starting from the south or is this starting from the north? And so I guess maybe I could have started with this. This would have been an interesting question to start with. But do you think that this war right here, maybe it was the 12-day war that was really the beginning, but do you think what we're seeing right now, which if this will have a name, I've wanted to call it the Purim War. I think maybe that's what I'm going to start calling it on the show. But do you think the Purim War is what we could truly say is the beginning of the reality that this is really starting from the south instead of the north? As maybe contextualize for the audience what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and actually that's interesting, because it do we consider the Maidan the beginning? This is where we have timeline that overlaps and different things overlap, and there's not really a specific a point, because time is happening, right? And the saints and those who are holy enough to see this are able to see things without the concept of time. And so they're putting these things out there, and we're just having to figure it out and live through it. That's interesting. I had not really thought about what that looks like. And in my mind, for whatever reason, I was thinking of Israel or Greece, like if it starts in the north of Greece or south of Greece, if it starts, north of Israel or south of Israel. And I had not really considered, this is probably, we're framing this wrong. We should probably be looking at Constantinople. And that's where we should judge whether it was the north or the south. And so if we're reaching as far back as 2014, we could definitely say all of this kind of started in the north, and then of course in 22 starting it again in the north. But then in the this is really the strike, hitting the matchbox, or this is the match being lit for real. in terms of larger regional global expansion of a conflict. The Russian conflict really didn't have that kind of effect. So in my mind, I say this is I'd say this starts from the South.
I would say, based on what Metropolitan Neophytos told me when I talked to him, is he kind of set it up for me as, look, if it starts with NATO in like Scandinavia in the north, you mentioned Finland with those bombers, like that's worst case scenario, which again, if you understand geopolitics, you can understand why that's worst case scenario. Whereas this war with Iran, perhaps, and again, this is a white pill. People ask, where's the good news? Where's the good news? This could be the good news. This could be people prayed, the monks prayed, Mount Athos prayed, you prayed. I did my best. I don't know like I did anything, but maybe you did something. And maybe God has shown some mercy, and this won't be, not again, because Jonathan's reading these things. Some of these say 200 million man army, 90 million dead, 150 million dead, these sorts of things. Maybe the numbers will be less. We do have a loving God, so this is what we can and should hope for, obviously.
Yeah, that's a fascinating thing. I putting this also goes back to, we're able to see this in real time in a way that even just a few years ago, really prior to COVID, I don't think things had anything in terms of war and real time war being able to be seen. Once everything started off with Ukraine and being able to see what that looks like. I mean, there's millions of hours of video of this on YouTube. You can see exactly what all of these different offensive look like from both sides. You can find it on Yandex from the Russian side, or Telegram. There's plenty of stuff being shared from both sides, and you're able to see a war basically in real time. And now you're able to see that even more so. But we're looking at things that are just you cannot comprehend the scale and the speed and all of this. Well, as this accelerates, that's not going to slow down. We're approaching something that is a unbelievable global battle that takes place in Constantinople, and you're talking about close to 1 billion people dying, just something that is unfathomable. And that what that even looks like, and so hopefully we have some form of repentance and mercy, because God does love mankind. But the prophecies show that it's awful.
No, and I mean, God even says, and Metropolitan Neophytos talked about this a lot, that there will be many people that will be taken away before this all happens, because they wouldn't be able to handle it. So in a way, that's also an encouragement. So look, people watching this, if you're Orthodox, don't worry, because I mean, your time comes, everyone's time comes. Look, I mean, so the idea that you get to live through these events, I think in many ways you should be honored. I think many people succumb to nostalgia or nostalgia for times that they never even lived in, as is the common saying, though, homesick for a time I'm not even sure existed, and these other sorts of things. But at the end of the day, God made you for no other time than this. And I used to have those feelings. I still do slip into those feelings. I wish I could have been born during the reign of St. John Vatatzis in Cappadocia. I wish I could have been born
in those were tough times
of even Nicholas II. But fundamentally,
also tough times.
I'm glad that I was born now, because I'm sure if I was born back then, I would have wished I had been born in Constantine's time, or I would have wished that I had been born in Justinian's time. So we need
we probably should have started off with a little bit of a disclaimer at the beginning, and to let people know if this kind of topic gives you anxiety, if you're a catechumen coming into the church, if you're someone who has had issues with other eschatological things with other faiths or otherwise, this is a very different situation. And it's not meant to cause anxiety for anyone. This is for us to understand, just as John the theologian was able to give us the apocalypse. He was letting us know what's coming. Christ himself allowed us to know what's coming, what these signposts, these guideposts are for the timeline of humanity, this itinerary of the faith. These are the things and the trials and the things that we'll have to go through as humanity goes along this timeline. So whether we live through it, who knows, right? And apparently not many in America do. So that's something we have to we have to contend with, especially someone who has a family or anything. You have to really understand that Christ conquered death, and we should have zero fear of our death. We should be focused on our repentance and praying to God that we're worthy enough for His mercy. Um,
No,
Especially when we see this. I think it becomes even more obvious when we see things like this, great wars, that we don't really understand the scale of. Even someone who was in the military and even following all of this, the scale of what's coming is really unimaginable. And just wrapping your mind around that is troublesome.
no, it really is. And I think, though, people need to realize, like, look, I think the only positive form of anxiety in all this is anybody that's watching this that isn't Orthodox or doesn't love our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. If this gives you anxiety, well, you should go to church. You should go and you should go to church and you should get right with the Lord. But if you're already Orthodox, then you shouldn't be anxious because you're home and you know what to do. And you know that, again, frankly, look, if you want to prepare, you should prepare. Jonathan has all sorts of resources available for people to want to prepare in the physical realm. But if you don't prepare and you face death, then you will die and you will go to heaven. That is what we believe as Christians. We believe that the end comes for all of us. And whether the end of the world comes for us and we see the Lord coming in glory, or the end of the world comes for you and you die of old age in a hospital bed, or the end of the world comes for you and you die in a volcanic eruption, you will go through the same toll houses regardless. So that is, you will face the Lord the same way. So what matters is to prepare for your end, which your end still comes when the world ends, and your end still comes even if the world doesn't end in your lifetime. So that is, I'm not treading any new ground here for experienced Orthodox, but anyone that's not Orthodox, that's the message, is become Orthodox. But we have $5 from Stephen Sterling. Sorry if I'm repeating a question, but how cooked is the East Coast, like mid-Atlantic region? Should expect nuclear weapons, floods? Well, floods can hit you at any time. Look at North Carolina and everything that happened there. I mean, that could have just happened, so you got to prepare regardless. But any specific region, look, I think the West Coast is probably going to face more of an issue, but like Jonathan said, you've got the Madrid faults, you've got these other things. So, I mean, look, I hate Nebraska, so I'm not moving to Nebraska, regardless. So I'm in Central Texas, and maybe it's not the best, but I think I'm doing okay. So I don't know. Maybe if we're getting super specific about regions, and that's your consideration, man, maybe you should just move to Cyprus or Georgia, Stephen. That might be your thing. But for those of us here in America, we've accepted that it might just kind of suck everywhere.
Yeah. If New York is Sodom and LA is Gomorrah, and both will be destroyed, then I wouldn't, I'd try to be away from that.
And there's a lot of places this might happen. I mean, Arseny Boca talks about Bucharest being destroyed.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all sorts of places where these things could go wrong. And then who knows what, in the midst of these things, who knows what specific revelations will be given to these people? Who knows what holy people reside in these parts of the world? These places will have their own struggles that will have so much more complexity to them than just the reality of their destruction as they are being destroyed. So that is,
and you should also, in looking at it, you don't want to move to a monastery so that you can survive something with your physical body. You want to move there so that you can nurture your soul. The whole point of it is, we're here for the glorification of God, and that's it. That's our existence, and whatever gets you closer to that, that's what you should be working on.
Well, and what about as far as these purposes of the of the monasteries themselves? I mean, the idea that you would be protecting your body but not preparing in soul, you're setting yourself up for an even worse failure, because you're not facing the plan that God has potentially laid out for you. So there's a whole lot of of considerations here that people need to recognize. And again, peacetime is not necessarily always the best in the spiritual realm. I mean, look at what has occurred during peace. God has likely determined that in this material comfort the world has lived in, look at the mass apostasy. He might have run the numbers and been like, might be spiritually healthier. More people might be saved in the midst of worldwide upheaval than they would in a sense of worldwide general tranquility. So it's a sign of how worldly the world is, that it's it doesn't matter how bad the spiritual situation gets. It doesn't matter how bad even humanity's physical situation gets with health in the West. None of that even matters as long as we don't physically go to war, as long as we aren't mean to one another. It's sort of it's sort of the expansion of the niceness morality, which again, niceness is not the same as loving one's neighbor. And I think God has come to the conclusion that, like you talked about, the great slap, God delivering the slap to people, it is very much necessary, I think, for the salvation of the world. And we have $2 from Jonathan Kelly. Get the Masons out of Greece. So true. I don't think anywhere else needs to get the Masons out more so than the Greeks. And we have $5 from E-War Mapping. Do y'all think that America will engage in a kinetic battle with Russia? In Elder Joseph of WWIII's Prophecies, it describes air battles with Americans. Well, I mean, the Russians have basically already engaged with air battles with the Americans. I mean, who do you think trains the Ukrainian soldiers, and who do you think is talking in their ear when all this is going on? But that would make sense. The idea that the Russians would somehow invade mainland America, or that American troops would even necessarily be in Russia, it seems unlikely, because I could see troops in Russia, but why would the Americans not just send some other big ethnic proxy that actually, is near that area? So I think air battles make a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think if you're looking at, we've moved a lot of hardware over to the Middle East, and it's not going to be returning. I look at it as this will continue until the next, domino or match strikes or whatever, thing you want to call it. Each piece is playing its part, and we're now we're going to move more hardware there, and each step is going to take us further down. So Russians and Americans will end up having an air battle over the Black Sea.
Yeah, I mean, that could happen tomorrow, literally. Like, I mean, that's something that is, again, well along the way. And there have been confrontations, and Romanian jets buzzing Russian jets, and drones shot down, and even drones that have gotten way too close to Turkey. So again, Jonathan, when Jonathan and I hear these things, it just automatically fills in. Like, I'll see the report about drone hits ship off the coast of Turkey, and I'm like, it just files right in there. But
what's that? The ghost of whatever that island?
Ghost of Kiev.
Yeah, there's that. There is nothing better than whatever timeline we're in now are the memes. Like, it's just been incredible. That's been the best part about.
$10 from Frog and Heat. Thank you for answering my questions. Thank you, brother, for supporting the show. Sorry, I'm not trying to miss the super chats. We're getting kind of backed up here. $2 asking to better prepare and take care of people. Totally understand, man. We all want to be prepared.
And it makes sense. It makes sense to prepare in every way that you can. I think it's pertinent to have. I should probably have a different stream to go into some of the bigger details of what being prepared looks like in reality. But I can tell you from a recent ice storm that you're going to have to figure out your systems. How are you cooking? How are you cleaning after you cook? Hygiene. Are you going to have facilities? If not, you're going to have to figure out how to manage whatever that waste and things like that. Luckily, we had water, but most people's pipes froze. There were a number of issues, and then you have to realize that there's a quality of life standard. So as soon as we were even able to get out of the house, the first 3 nights without power, I've got a kerosene heater here, and I've got carbon monoxide detectors, and even a micrometer for carbon monoxide to make sure that I've got 2 children and family. I don't want to die in a house from that. So you've got to have all of this, whatever you have, plus whatever type of safety equipment or material to use it, and then even that you're going to have to let air in. You can get through maybe the night, and then you're going to have to refill that. How much fuel is that going to take? I got maybe 6.5 to 8 hours, depending on. So in the middle of the night, in negative 14-degree weather, I'm going to have to step out there, and I'm going to have to refill this kerosene heater. And that's when it's cold. But say this happens when it's warm, food's going to spoil faster. Like, there's so many things to consider that after 3 days of that, my wife doesn't care for camping. So they were in a hotel, and they're in a hotel 20 minutes away. But then there's reports of looting going on. So now it's like, okay, well, I'm going to go be with the house. I've got to, maybe clean up, maintain some things, get things running, keep the fuel running in here. So like it just that reiterated a level of preparedness that in my mind I was like, all right, I got all these things. Thank God I had a kerosene heater still in the box ready to go, and several hundred gallons of fuel and all the different things that I need. But most people didn't have that in Nashville. Most people had to go find somewhere. And then we were so blessed to stay with our godparents for 4 days. They live, basically a mile away, just down the street. And that was an amazing experience. So even during all of this horrible stuff going on, you're dealing with it. I'm having to put new electrical mast on because everything got ripped off. We've got no trees left. Everything's just been destroyed. My family's getting to spend all this time, this quality time, living with their godparents. And so even during the trials, that's when you can recognize your blessings even more so.
Well, no, and that's where, there were certain communities, not the majority, small minority, but there were communities that really resisted and kind of grew really close during COVID. And I think, thankfully, a lot of places that didn't do that maybe learned their lesson from COVID. And then if things go that way here, we'll see a lot of, I mean, look, Patriarch Kirill, everyone misinterprets what he said. He was talking, there will be a lot of opportunities for salvation in the midst of a war if you're a soldier, and there will be a lot of opportunities for salvation in the midst of a crisis if you are just a layperson, an American. So that's how you have to think about all of this. We have $10 from Matthew Jenkins. To the powerful people today, the New World Order, people like Trump, Gates, Musk, etc., know what they are getting themselves into, or are they way too arrogant, or will they be blindsided? Well, I think they think they know what they're getting into, but they will still be blindsided. Like, I think that's how it's going to go, right? Is they've probably, I mean, this war specifically, I'm sure you agree, Jonathan, this was probably planned years, if not months ago in their minds. But how things are going to develop from that, that's where they might get perhaps a bit blindsided by God's plan, because God's plan is a lot more, is going to happen a lot more exact than their plans.
Yeah, I think that's what's the adage? Something, no one laughs more than God when someone says he has a plan, or there's something to that effect. And that's really this is something that I've been able to discuss even with very close friends that I have that aren't Orthodox. Is it doesn't matter really what I believe. It matters what the people who are doing all of this horrible shit believe. And so if they, are slinging chickens, then they have this certain aspect of everything that they're leading the whole world through. And the, the control mechanisms that are allowing it. So from Epstein and everything else there to Trump, and then today it was released about the American troops receiving some type of thing from their commanders about Trump being anointed by God and all of this, and he's the one who has to start the Armageddon. So it doesn't matter whether you believe this; they believe it, and they're doing it. So that's kind of another perspective for those who aren't so caught up in the specifics. It really, if the world's being run by it and they believe it, then maybe it'd be important to at least understand what those beliefs are. For us, their Messiah is the Antichrist, and well, that's I think they're going to be a little bit surprised.
Yeah. What Jonathan just referenced there, a U.S. military commander addressing his troops, he said, President Trump has been anointed by Jesus to light the signal fire in Iran to cause Armageddon and mark his return to earth. So full on dispensationalist, Jewish supremacist nonsense. So that is the people that are currently commanding this war that we are waging on the behalf of world Jewry against Iran. So I think, frankly, they're treating it, as you said, eschatologically. Maybe if we're not treating it eschatologically in the sense of the final end of the world, we should at the very least be treating it eschatologically in the end of our world that we are currently living in, because that's another thing. There are many Armageddons. There are many ends of the world that have already happened. You think in 1453, you think that wasn't kind of like the end of the world? I'm sure it was a lot like the end of, 1918 was certainly the end of almost everything before that. So so many major shifts and things that have gone on. We have $10 from Aaron Arhart. Glory to God for his mercy and his saints, leaving us these prophetic warnings. Thanks to you both for helping spread this info. Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me, sinner. Thank you for tuning in, Aaron. Glad to see you in the chat. Haven't seen you much before, so thank you for all of the support. We have $5 from Paisios. He says, because of this war, many men and women will become saints just by giving food to his neighbors. So true.
Yeah,
that's what it says. All you have to do is just provide for your neighbors. That there's many saints that have said that will be your main focus. That will be what you need to. And so all of you listening to this, you're on the hook. That's the tough part about being Orthodox, is when you die, you'll be held accountable because you had sort of the fullness of the truth revealed to you in this life. And if you're on this stream, you're going to be responsible. You can't, if you go out and loot like everybody else, you're going to be going to hell faster than probably most of those other looters, because they probably weren't tuning into this stream.
We don't know their souls.
$5 from Jonathan Kelly, asking again, is there an Orthodox holy war doctrine? Not exactly. We do have an understanding of just wars, and we have patriarchs and saints. I mean, just read about Dmitry Donskoy and Alexander Peresvet. We've even had warrior monastics, which, again, not to say that might not have been breaking certain local norms, but obviously there have been what we would describe as righteous and just conflicts that have been fought. But no, actually, if you want to find out about this, I think it was, I'm forgetting if it was Heraclius or Nikephoros Phokas. It might have been Nikephoros Phokas. No, I think it was either Heraclius. I'm forgetting which one it was, but one of them pursued, with consultation with church figures, the idea of basically creating within Orthodoxy an understanding of martyrdom similar to what the Muslims have, where if you die in subservience to what they understand is the Ummah, but we have understood as like the Roman Empire, then you would be considered a martyr. But the church, the council rejected that. That was not deduced to deemed to be proper Christian practice. So that's been a discussion in Christian history. But no, we don't have jihad as they do per se. And
there is a. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
There is the one book I was looking at. I've got it sitting over here somewhere, but it's a black cover, and sometimes that's difficult to find. But it's the I don't know. I can't think of the even title, but it's like the Rite of Violence or something. It's a Serbian text, and it's about just conflict in that sense. I'll see if I can find it, but that's pretty much the only real text that covers that topic. And of course, we don't have holy wars or anything like that. That's a very frank, Latin frank thing. That's what caused all of this, actually.
Well, we have On Resistance to Evil by Force from
that's
Ivan.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to. I could not think of the title for that. On Resistance to Force. Yeah. That's
a good one. I actually was at Ivan Ilyian's grave just a few months ago in Moscow at the Donskoy Monastery with Cameron McGregor. Just very, very beautiful place. Everyone should go to Donskoy. If you go to Moscow, that's where St. Tikhon's relics are. That's where the chrism for the Moscow Patriarchate is made. And that's where many White Army generals, Solzhenitsyn as well, are buried. So that's awesome. Very interesting place. 50 Hong Kong dollars from Elias Lau, Hong Kong. As a person living in the Far East, please share prophecies related to China and Japan specifically. Thank you, Conrad and Jonathan. Thank you, sir. For those that know, I think 50 Hong Kong dollars is like $6 US, but thank you. Really great. I think I looked up the conversion rate, but it was fascinating. Thank you, Elias. I've seen you in the streams before. Good to see you. China and Japan, very interesting, of course. I know both are said to mount huge armies in the future of all of this. And just to tie it to current events, I know Jonathan was probably pulling some things up. I know that Japan right now, they just elected this right-wing government at the behest of the United States, and the Japanese constitution forbids them from having a proper military, but they are about to do away with all of that. Japan is about to reemerge as a military nation. So as far as these prospects of a Japanese army, you talk about that 5 years ago, people would have thought you were crazy. But now here we are. As I say before, the arc of history very much bends towards the saints. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on China, Japan.
Yeah, so China's an easy one. It's pretty clear, and St. Paisios even makes this clear that I think that the Chinese army crosses the Euphrates. That's what the large army that's discussed as the sixth trumpet, and something happens during this massive global war, which takes about 2 years. And when that Russia sweeps Turkey and Georgia, goes down all the way almost to Jerusalem, and then has to basically return. The Chinese find either some opportunity or something happens, but they betray China. China betrays them by the lure of taking over Siberia. So Elder Athanasius says, only one thing will break the Russians: betrayal by the Chinese. Lured by control over all of Siberia, the Chinese will pull back their troops and allow Allied forces to strike from behind. Saint Seraphim of Sarov said the end would come through China. And then Saint Seraphim of Varitsia says Siberia will fall to the Chinese, who will eventually occupy all Siberia as far as the Urals. So there's an idea that once this global war, once the actual, we're in the lead up, but once this massive global war that takes 2 years, where we're actually fighting NATO and Russia and things like that, that China will kind of sidestep and allow America to attack them from Japan, and allow Japan to attack Russia as well. And then Russia on those two fronts. And then China itself will take portions of the Russian territory all the way to the Urals. So the discussion is that China comes all the way to the Urals is repeated. There's a half dozen prophecies that mention that they're going to come that far, and if they're coming that far, they're also apparently crossing the Euphrates. So
this is a good example of kind of how you want to approach these kinds of things. If you are going to kind of dedicate yourself to being interested in discerning the truth in this realm of research, like you and I both have, is you've got a dozen saints talking about it. They all give different loose details that sort of create a general narrative. That's the kind of thing that when someone asks me, I'll tell them, like, yeah, I think China's going to invade Siberia. Whereas, not to call anybody out, but earlier, I think the St. Patrick stuff is super interesting, but you hear a lot of saints who they kind of have one-offs and these things like this. And that's not to say that those aren't true and you don't reference them, but it's not, you don't classify those as necessarily as authoritative, much like, we have a lot of things outside of the scriptures that we have to sort of rank in their level of authority. Something like the Didache and the writings of the Cappadocian fathers are going to have a lot more weight than, I don't know, the writings of just some random local bishop or something like this. So the China stuff, it's something that you see all over the place. And I believe Elder Joseph of Vatopedi, as far as Japan goes, I think he talks about the big Japanese army as well, which is interesting.
Yeah, he mentions the Japanese will be able to strike and as a part of NATO, even though they're not a part of NATO, but as a part of the NATO force. And I think he says, I've got some of that here. He says, this is the beginning of all these events, distressing events, wars. The Jews are behind all this evil. The devil prompts them to do this, to start it, to destroy the fruit of orthodoxy in Greece and Russia. This is their primary obstacle on the road to global domination. In any case, they will force the Turks to come here to Greece to start their work. Even though Greece formally has a government, in reality it lacks power, and the Turks will come here. And this will be the moment when Russia will move its forces as well to force the Turks into retreat. Events will unfold as follows. When Russia moves to help Greece, the Americans and NATO will try to prevent this, so there won't be unity, no union between the two Orthodox nations. They will mobilize their forces, other forces, such as the Japanese and others, and there will be a terrible slaughter in the area of the former Byzantine Empire. From them alone, 600 million will die. The Vatican will play a significant role in all of this to prevent the increasing role of orthodoxy and to stop such a union. Such divine providence will find its fulfillment. Yeah,
that's always been a crazy one, and there's always, again, that's another example of how, like, a lot of the prophecies, again, they aren't, all of these were laid out to specific people at specific times, not exactly meant to be every single one individually read in the way that we are presenting it. So when you understand the context, you realize that, for example, the idea that Russia and Greece, have this Orthodox brotherly nature to it. St. Paisios almost never talks about that. St. Paisios' prophecies are almost all about how the Russians will be forced into doing this. He even says they won't do it because they like us. Whereas you have Elder Scalactia, who does say that there will be an element of Orthodox fellowship that will motivate it. So people are like, oh, therefore the prophecies contradict. No, it's both and, because Look at it right now. There's people I've been to the front lines in Donbass. There are pious Orthodox people there that have performed acts of heroism, miracles that have occurred on the front line, saving people's lives and converting them. Does that mean that all of the Russian leadership make all of their decisions based on Orthodox spirituality? Unfortunately, that is very far from what actually goes down. So, of course, it's going to be both and as a civilizational reality, this is going to unfold. And after this war, wars are often one of the things that prefigure huge spiritual revivals. So again, in the midst of this, the idea that there would be a spiritual shift in people's attitudes is far from the craziest thing that I think is going to happen as these things are being prophesied. We have $5 again from Stephen. The poor children and nursing mothers, O Lord Jesus Christ, our God, have mercy on us sinners. He says, are there prophecies on what will come of China? We just talked about that, so hopefully you.
I will mention two more that I have sitting here. This is actually from St. Paisius, and he says the Middle East will be the arena of the wars in which the Russians will take part. A lot of blood will be shed, and even the Chinese will cross the Euphrates with an army of 200 million and reach Jerusalem. A characteristic sign that these events are approaching will be the destruction of the Omar Mosque, since its destruction will mean the beginning of work on the reconstruction of the Temple of Solomon, which was built on that very place. And then secondly, a prophecy from an elder schema monk, John, who was from the Church of St. Nicholas the Pleasant in the village of Nikolskaya. He says, China will go to war against us with an army of 200 million and will occupy all of Siberia to the Urals. The Japanese will host the Far East, and Russia will begin to be torn apart. A terrible war. Russia will remain within the borders of the times of Tsar Ivan the Terrible. Two thoughts there. I actually do have a few more on Japan but
let's hear it.
It's the same concept. Sarah from Avaritia says that the time will come when Russia will be torn to pieces. First, it will be divided, and then it will then they will begin to plunder wealth. The West will, in every way possible, contribute to the destruction of Russia and will give up the eastern part of it to China for a while. The Far East will be taken over by the Japanese and Siberia to the Chinese, who will move to Russia, marry the Russians, and in the end, by cunning and deceit, will take the territory of Siberia to the Urals. When China wants to go further, the West will resist and not allow it. I mean, there's Siberia will be yellow completely. The Japanese Far East, and for Siberia for its oil and gas, gold, everything else, the battles will not even be with ours, but with the Americans. Even though the Stars and Stripes are in the hands of the world Zionism, they will not be able to defeat the Chinese, and the yellow rivers will flow to European Russia. The whole source will be ablaze. Slavic blood will be spilled. The Japanese will not give the Far East to the Chinese. The islanders will simply have nowhere to live. The Japanese know about the coming tragedy of their islands. Through the wise men, it was revealed to them since ancient times. That's from Father Anthony Krasnov. In the Urals, most of the people will remain under the Chinese as the seizure of the territory will be quick and a terrible famine will begin. I have many on China and that, but basically China does take quite a bit of this land.
Jonathan Kelly, $5 more. What if trust the plan? The plan was laid out in Revelation. So true. When I trust the plan, I'm trusting God's plan, not some Jewish plan to get people elected for the Republican Party. We have $5. Boogie Whistle. Would it be wise to take refuge in one of Elder Ephraim's monasteries when USA inevitably falls? We live about an hour away, so it's my game plan. That sounds beautiful, brother. Pursue a relationship with monastics there.
If you're going to do something like that, it would be beneficial to obviously have a relationship with several of the people there, to be in communication with them, and to find out what they need. Every monastery needs something, and it's our job to help support them in some way. I think of this quote, and I can't remember who it was. A lady, a blessed lady, not a saint, but she explained that if maybe this was Donishka, I don't remember, that if the only reason why we exist, we are in existence, our reality, is because there's prayer somewhere. And if prayer ceases, then everything ceases, because our only purpose here is the glorification of God. So I think about that regularly, and it's those monasteries where they spend their time praying that keep us even with the ability to do what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious your thoughts, because I want to specifically get into, you talk about Russia and China. I'm just curious. We have some prophecies about from Saint Seraphim, for example, about how the Antichrist won't rule past the trench up in Divyevo. We have also a lot of prophecies about how Russia, the church, will somehow be preserved as one of a bastion of orthodoxy. So how do you reconcile some of that with the stuff about China, as well as with, I mean, we even have prophecies about how Patriarch of Moscow will crown the Antichrist, whereas Patriarch of Jerusalem will be against him, and all of these other sorts of things. So I'd be curious as how you would read some of those different prophecies that to the average person might seem contradictory.
Yeah. Well, you have to look at it like where we're at on, going along this kind of timeline that we've assembled, and if you're looking for this timeline, there is a pretty decent. I don't include every quote, but just enough to give some backdrop to it. But you can go to eschatonvigil.org/timeline/, and that it'll show up there. So if you want to post that, it may help people kind of at least frame their mind around what we're talking about, because this battle of Constantinople takes place, and that gives a eventually basically everyone's done doing the killing, and there's this moment where Constantinople is given to the Greece, and this is when the Holy King is crowned, right? And this is where we get into St. John Vatatzis. This is where there is a moment where there's a peace, and orthodoxy shines for 30 or 35 years. There's the 8th Ecumenical Council that's convened. So we're not even to the Antichrist yet. Like
10th
this
Ecumenical Council.
What did I say?
8th.
It is the 8th Ecumenical Council, right?
There's already been an 8th Ecumenical Council. There's also been a 9th Ecumenical Council. 8th Ecumenical Council was 879, and the 9th Ecumenical Council was the Palamite Synods.
Yeah, but I don't know if those. Well, this gets into something above my pay grade on what counts as ecumenical and who decides on that, because I believe it's Saint Nihilus who says after the war there's a last and 8th Ecumenical Council will be convened to deal with the heretics and separate the wheat from the chaff.
Undoubtedly, there needs to be another council, but
whatever the number is.
I mean, I've got the translation of the 8th Ecumenical Council from. I mean, that's how I met Father Peter Hears, was at this conference celebrating the 8th Ecumenical Council.
Yeah, and I've actually read that. I always just refer to it, I guess, because I'm thinking of all the stuff from St. Nihilus.
Well, and sure, I mean, if he was, I mean, not everybody, he might not have thought of it like that. So undoubtedly, it would still totally.
Yeah, for him, it was still early, and that's where you get into the the discussion of what's what the saints are looking at versus what they're not. And so, what I was mentioning though is after the war, there's a period of peace, and during that peace, Orthodoxy continues to flourish like it is now, and then we get into the actual Antichrist, second coming, last couple of years, and that's what I guess a lot of people are thinking about. Oh, this is coming right now, or something like that.
That's the problem with here. I've got all these people that find my show and they're like, "Oh, this is an end time show," and it's like, not really. Like, sure, that's relevant, but like we're talking, like the World War is not the end times. The World War is leading up to actually something better, and then the end times. So
to a Hellenic, Constantinople. This is something that we're. I mean, that's 40 years from now. I'm almost 40 now, so who knows if I'll be around for any of that in general. But that's the idea. So there is this vague timeline that has been established by looking at what the saints have told us.
And while all of this is happening, I think that, I mean, look, Metropolitan Neophytos, who, is if we had one main living source for all of this, it's him.
Yes.
And he talks about how all of the information, and even us right now on this broadcast, the information highway of the internet is going to be used to spread orthodoxy, and I think spread even this information that we're having right now. And I don't think Jonathan and I would ever claim to be part of that explicitly, but having him be around and be talking about all of this stuff is undoubtedly a sign a sign of these times. And I think there's no everyone kind of is afraid to assign themselves to even to recognize that they are living in those times, because it's such a scary thing to think about. But just like the Roman Empire, those roads were used to spread Christianity and even use persecution. The internet, which is in many ways a terrible place, is still being used to preach all of this and everything. And then the English language is such an important part of it. So even people we know, Father Peter Hears, I view his work translating all of some of these things and talking to Metropolitan Neophytos, having these conferences as a fulfillment of St. Porphyrios's prophecy about his words being heard around the world. So if there's anything specific you guys would pray for World War Now, I'm trying my best to get him on the show. So if we can have Metropolitan Neophytos come on the show, pray for that if you could, because I think that would be a really, really, important development. Because, Father Peter can talk to him, but Father Peter is really just a Greek guy at the end of the day. I give him the credit. He's become Greek. Whereas, I'm an autistic American. It'd be really good. So that would be a high watermark for World War Now, to say the least. But we saw some people in the comments. I saw someone asking about Romania. I mentioned the destruction of Bucharest that is going to come. Arseny Boca, his prophecies are some of the most fascinating to me, which even before I even knew who you were, Jonathan. So the fact that you have the Arseny Boca chapter in this book is one of my favorite parts, because he predicted 9/11, all of these other crazy things. So there are, of course, I'm sure people in parts of the world that have been paying attention to this a whole lot longer than even Jonathan and I, that have been having their mind blown for even longer than we have. But the situation with every country, especially Orthodox countries with saints, there are prophecies that will be about that country. I mean, look at Georgia. That's another question I'm curious about, because we talk a lot about Georgia, because St. Philomenos talks about Georgia, St. Gabriel Logobadzi talks about Georgia. St. Gabriel seems to indicate that Georgia will be safe during the Antichrist, but they also say that St. Philomenos says that Georgia will melt like a candle.
Yeah.
So my perspective is they're going to be sort of a transit. They're going to be a corridor for the Russians to pass through. Maybe there will be some initial destruction, but after that, then it will be safe. Does that seem to be the understanding that you would agree with?
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear. There's a mention that if there's any hesitation for them allowing the Russians to pass through on their way to Turkey, then it'll be destroyed. But if it's basically a step out of the way, then things won't be affected. That's kind of the two sides of it. The north or the south, worse or better. The same thing with that. It's, well, if they allow the Russians to pass through unmolested, then they won't affect as much on the populace. Now, if they get into a situation where I think Romania has one of the largest NATO military bases, so those things like that are probably going to be annihilated in order for that to take place. Oh, you're muted.
I remember a prophecy about how, like, the Romanians and the Serbs would repent properly, but the Bulgarians wouldn't, which, again, some of these get so specific that, I mean, even myself, I'm like, how does that make sense? Because look right now, of those three countries, Bulgaria has the best patriarch by far, so it's interesting to see how and when some of these things will happen.
Yeah, very interesting. There's a renewal of Orthodoxy everywhere at the moment. It's not, I mean, America is booming. We had 12 baptized on Saturday, and that was amazing to see, considering our church just several years ago was 12 people in a small house, and now it's hundreds of people, and people are being added by the dozens, every other month or so. So that's an amazing thing, but that's also taking place elsewhere. This kind of renewal, and it's happening because of this apocalypse, because of this unveiling. It's happening because people can see there's good and there's evil. And it's obvious who is evil now, because they always go after the same thing. They always go after children. They always hurt children. They always destroy something with children involved. And that's just a part of their SOP. This is the demonic, chicken slingers that are involved in all of this.
100%. And as far as some of these people in the future conversions, I mean, there's even prophecies about them the chicken slingers themselves having mass conversions to Orthodoxy. And I've thought about that in a lot of different ways. I mean, you could easily think it maybe the Sephardic and the Mizrahim become Orthodox, and the Ashkenazi stay worshiping the Antichrist. Maybe it's some variation of all of this, but again, understanding. Look at the Turks; it's a similar situation with the Turks and the Jews, with what will happen to them with them becoming Orthodox versus them not. I'm very excited, Jonathan. Maybe you can talk a little bit. Actually, this is an opportunity for you to plug, but I'm just interested, regardless, about the new St. John Vatatzis book in English that you're translating. Of course, for those that don't know, the icon behind Jonathan is St. John Vatatzis. I show my St. John Vatatzis icon on the show all the time. For those that don't know, haven't listened to the Gregory Hears St. John Vatatzis episode that we've done, those are still some of the episodes that I'm the most proud of on the Ether Hour. And Jonathan is now, through the Eschaton Vigil, about to put out what is really the first book exclusively about St. John in English. So I'm curious about it.
Yeah, that has been an incredible labor of love. So I have this blessed friend in Greece named Charzanis, who was able to contact Yanis Sarsarkis, who wrote the only book on St. John Vatatzis. And then he ended up writing a second book as well. And he was able to contact him. We got onto a Zoom call, and we were able to talk and discuss kind of. He's the resident expert on St. John Vatatzis. He hosts an annual Vatatzia every year in Didiomoteco, where St. John Vatatzis is from, and this whole, that is the Vatatzis world. He's the expert. And so I wanted to at least talk to him and ask him, hey, would you let me translate your book into English? And he said, yes, I'm happy to do it. And his publisher said no. So I don't know, we couldn't figure out any reasons. I don't think he was as pleased about having to say no. He was excited about it. So, but he said, hey, you can use any of my work in translations and quotations and whatever else that you want. But there needs to be a book, and it needs to showcase St. John kind of, it needs to showcase him as he is in terms of a historical, just what an incredible figure he was historically. So he lived from 1193 to 1254. He was the emperor from 1222 to 1254, and there's so much about him historically that is just awesome. But we reference him because of the prophecies. So the prophecies describe him as returning to reign over Constantinople. And he was the emperor in exile. He was technically the emperor of Nicaea. And
he set the empire up for the city to be retaken after it fell to the Latins in the 13th century.
Yep. And so in this, it's a 300-page book. I have about 1,575 citations.
Wow.
It is more of an academic work than a novel. I tried to do some balance in that, but especially the first part of it, the first couple chapters are focused on all the historical stuff that no one in America knows. I probably had little reference to this from my own personal study, even being interested in some of the Byzantine history. It's just a very niche topic about a very specific time, and it's fascinating. So he was born into it in the late 12th century, and that was during a time of the eve of catastrophe as all of this took place. And I go through the book and explain through that the world, kind of how all this was working. I try to give enough of a background, and then explain about him being a warrior diplomat. That was very important from Yanis Sarsarkis to be able to show that and explain why he fit perfectly in this spot between he's the prototypical Byzantine emperor. He was a warrior, a diplomat. He was also a farmer and considered the father of the Greeks because of all of these economic reforms that he participated in, as well as a patron of the church and a patron of learning. And he was considered merciful. And there is so much about it that is like, oh, well, if we had an emperor come back to Constantinople, it has to be that St. John, because no other emperor provided such an archetype of perfect Orthodox Byzantine emperorship. And so this is, hopefully the book will showcase all of what that is. And I go into why he was glorified, and the miracles and his incorrupt relics, and then of course talk about the legend of the Marble King and the legacy of some of the prophecies and things like that, and some of the lessons for today. Basically, if you were I don't know who's one of these, there's so many of them out there now, these Insta business people, or Insta people who are trying to showcase like, oh, well, this is how you should be, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If you were able to use his criteria for what it was to be a merciful leader, and I know years ago in the Protestant world, there's a big push to call things servant leaders and whatever, and this is the Orthodox take on what leadership is. And so I try to explain a lot of that. Also include some of the a few histories of other things that are relevant for that, because it eventually becomes his his son who wrote the great supplicatory canon to the Most Holy Theotokos, which is chanted during the Dormition fast. So like there are so many other little pieces to this that he touched in some way. It was, it ended up being his son who wrote it, but obviously that it was incorporated into his son. His son stayed with the church, right? And like all of these little pieces of things that we're supposed to be as men and leaders, and he was able to do that. So he is the archetype, and hopefully I've done him some justice by producing this. So I have already had this looked at by my friend, and also sent it to Jonas Lasarkis for notes, and hopefully I'll have some of those notes back here soon and be able to put it out.
That's amazing. And I think once it comes out, I'd love to get you on and have Gregory on, and we could do a stream about it and get everyone to buy the book and discuss more about St. John, because he's an incredible saint. And I'm hoping that within my lifetime I could see, I know we'll see some chapels because I'll be building them myself, but I would love to see a parish potentially named after St. John Vatatzes here.
We're having that's something that the Vigil is doing. We are having an iconographer. You can find her. Her name's Veronica, and she's a Canadian iconographer. She's producing a cathedral-sized icon of St. John Vatatzes in a new tradition with a sword out. And I'm really excited to see what that is. She was pregnant through the process, and then she's on maternity leave, so she'll probably pick up sometime in the next couple months or in the summer or something to finish. But it's human scale, so it's a very large icon, and hopefully one day that'll be in a chapel dedicated to him somewhere, not too far from wherever I live.
Oh, that's amazing. And I love my hand-painted icon of St. John. With the reason I got it is it's the only one available currently with the sword out. So Father James made sure to get that one. But the one I've seen the videos from Veronica, it looks amazing. I'm very, very excited to see how that comes along. And again, I know if you go to St. John Chrysostom in Michigan, you can see an icon of St. John on the wall there. So if you're ever in Michigan, go to check that out. But it's more parishes. I think when your book comes out, I think more and more people are going to start knowing about this, because obviously most Orthodox people don't even know about Saint. And he has so many names too: Saint John III, Saint John the Merciful, Saint John Vatatzes, Saint John Dukas Vatatzes, Saint John of Nicaea. So once all of that is in the popular imagination, I think he's going to be a hit, as it were. People love Saint Paisios. There's certain saints that really resonate with Americans. Saint Seraphim of Sarov, some of these guys. I think Saint John Vatatzes is going to become one of those guys. But
there's a lot that could be studied from its leadership that we as Orthodox, now that we're growing into this, should be able to pull from that. And then, if you don't mind me plugging to continue, I've got another set of books that I'm hoping to have out soon as well, called the set's called Before the Dread Judgment. And the first of those books is focused specifically on it's a 6-book set, and the first book is focused on a commentary of Revelation according to more contemporary saints, and it should be interesting to a lot of people. Many of the texts came from a monk on Mount Athos. Some of his even stuff from some of I don't know. It's just kind of a compendium of sorts, because it was the only text that I haven't really tackled yet in terms of providing something. There's plenty of prophecies, but we also have the original, and I wanted to at least have commentary on that. So that should be out soon, as well as all the books I think are complete and are going through formatting, and I may end up combining some of them. Some of them are smaller, so may not end up being a full 6-book set. It may end up being maybe 3, but it's 6 books in total, just as a note. So the book 1, Revelation Unveiled, should be out in the next month or 2.
We will be looking forward to it. I'm gonna have to reset up my bookshelf, just have a whole Eschaton Vigil section, so it all looks aesthetically.
That's the goal. I was sharing my eventual huge 7-book set, which will combine everything into a new format. And
I can confirm, without doxing any specific locations, I provided a specific church bookstore with 10 copies of Eschatological Visions of the Blessed, and they sold out within 2 days. So,
oh really? That's fantastic to hear. I was happy to send them, and I'd be happy to send more. We have them in my parish bookstore, and one of the people who got baptized, he also, we share the same godfather, and so I went to the guy who managed our bookstore. I was like, hey, I'm stealing from the bookstore, but I'll get you more, I promise. So I could give him a copy of it. I didn't have one handy.
You should set up an option on the Eschaton Vigil website so people can order in bulk for a parish or something. That would be a super cool. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I would like to. It has become it's probably just simpler because that's so infrequent to have people just email me. There is a feedback form on the website, and I do get requests. I've had quite a few requests in the last week, and it's been a little chaotic, so I haven't gotten into all of them. There, I've had several people ask me for quotes to ship out to like Germany and different countries, which I'm happy to get them quotes, and I will. Please. Continue to be patient. I promise I'll get to them, but it's just challenging with shipping outside of the US, the way the shipper does it, because I don't print them. Obviously it's a print vendor, and they ship, and so I don't have to manage any of that unless there's a issue. We've had, out of however many books have been sold, I've had maybe 4 have issues. I had a lady yesterday who got the wrong book, and I was like, no problem, I'll contact them, and they sent her another one, no problem. It was just they've actually been really good. I was always nervous about it because you never know how that's going to work out, and so far it's been good. I've had maybe 4 people out of however many thousands of books that have been sold to say, hey, I've got an issue. So if you do have an issue, feel free to reach out. I'll take care of however it needs to be taken care of.
No, it's a great service, and the books are very well put together, so high quality stuff. The as far as St. John Vatatzis goes, just when else are what now no better time to talk about it than now. We hear a lot of we've discussed in our shows that we've done in the past about how there are prophecies even from the same saints in the same specific given prophecy about both a czar and an emperor, about these dichotomies. My favorite always has been Eldris Danushka, about how there will be in the as a prince from, this is from a Russian perspective, from the land that gave us our faith, which clearly means Greece, Byzantium, Anatolia, these sorts of places. So I guess the question that is always on people's minds, and I generally actually refrain from speculating on this, but I want to be transparent with the audience. Obviously, I do speculate on it. So what is your perspective on his emergence? Some people have speculated it'll be sort of there will be a person that embodies his spirit, but maybe, him will be behind the scenes. What does something like that look like? Because I personally sort of believe the maximalist version of the prophecy, but I'm curious as to, because we've heard of stories of how St. John has already appeared to people, and that he's already up and walking around, and that he appeared to even people in Didymoteco and told them what jobs they would have in the new empire. So there's all sorts of these stories. I'm curious about how you kind of handle this, what to most people sounds absurdly outlandish.
Yeah, this is it's interesting. This is a portion of the faith where we have to accept that we don't understand, and we have to accept what the saints have told us. Anytime there's something I'm not really positive on, I look for it from the saints to see how they explain it. And Elder Ephraim was very very clear. He made it very clear that this was expected. There you go. Yep. That he would descend from the throne, and so the holy bishop told him that he saw Saint John Vatatzis, and he would rise again. So I don't really I can't guess, but there are right now, I think I have maybe 12.5 testimonies and prophecies that explain more about that. Everything, even him appearing to the Fenar. So it seems to me either he or someone in his spirit is able to be the leader of the new Hellenic Constantinople. And if it was clear to the saints that came before that it would be John, then I have no reason to doubt that. Just in the same way that we look at it, like Elijah, the two prophets from Revelation who will be there, who will be struck down by the Antichrist. What does that mean? Will it be those exact prophets? Well, that's what it says. So I have to, take it at that until I can understand it.
For anyone that might be missing a bit of context, the only currently, before Jonathan's book is published, the best thing, unfortunately, this book is out of print, so I shouldn't even be saying this, but this book has a chapter about St. John Vatatzis, and I'm going to read two of the stories here, because these are some of the most contemporary accounts that, like Jonathan just recounted the story of Elder Ephraim, who, I'll read that story really quick here for everybody. It said, Elder Ephraim revealed, on Mount Athos there was a hierarch named Timotheus from Asia Minor. The ecumenical patriarch had put him on Mount Athos to do ordinations, etc. He was a holy hierarch. I was ordained to the priesthood by this holy archpriest. Elder Ephraim is saying this. He said, this holy hierarch told us that he saw the sleeping general John Vatatzis. We had taken him to our church and asked him questions, and he told us, we heard this with our own ears, there is this sleeping king, and he will be resurrected. We say to him, when, holy hierarch of God? He says, when the Third World War will take place. He also told us that his right hand is on the grip of the sword. World War III will begin when the sword comes out of its scabbard. And we, out of curiosity, told him, Your Excellency, how far is the sword out of the sheath? A few centimeters are left to come out. He answered, and it talks about how when this was, which was in the 70s and 80s, about when this was going down.
And that's also available in actually all the ones you're about to read. The colonel or the major or whatever.
The general and then the professor.
Yeah, but both of those are also available in my book.
Yes. Yeah. The one right here, it says, a Greek university professor who was friends with two Turkish professors at the University of Constantinople. In a discussion he had with them about what was to come, the subject of the reconquest of Constantinople came up. Then the Turkish professors, who were apparently crypto-Christians, said to him, do you want us to take you to see something unique on the condition that we blindfold you for the entire journey so that you won't be able to identify the location? Because what you will behold is a closely guarded secret. He accepted, and his eyes were opened after they arrived at the place. At one point, there was an open tomb without any insignia. Then, inside the grave, he saw a man dressed in royal robes of the Roman Eastern Byzantine Empire, who was rose-colored as if asleep, and who had two purple crosses on his shoulders. He wore a complete military uniform of the time and had his hands on the sword, drawn almost entirely, with only a few centimeters left before it was detached from its scabbard. And while he was watching, dumbfounded, his friend said to him, this is Duke John Vatatzis, king of Nicaea. He will lead the Eastern Roman Byzantine race. This secret is transmitted from generation to generation. Some believers and traditions say that the Greeks will take back what they lost when his sword comes out of its sheath completely. And we have noticed that the sword moves by 1 or 2 millimeters every 5 years. And then we have that one I just read you is from the 70s. This one I'm about to read you from this general is from the 1980s. It says the following testimony was published in an article by journalist Eleni Kypriou, the first host of Greek television, on the eve of the anniversary of the fall of Constantinople, May 28th, 1990. Constantinople fell on May 29th, 1453. A decade ago, they served on both sides of the Evros on the border, dividing our Thrace into two, a Greek and a Turkish crypto-Christian general with a Greek wife. Both generals had a close friendship. When the time came for them to be transferred for service elsewhere, the Turk invited his Greek colleague to a surprise, taking him in his car and driving him for 2 hours on a moonless night, stopping at an iron gate with writing in Greek. When they then proceeded into a double-barred iron narrow door that the Turk unlocked and walked into a basement, saying, "Do you Greeks not believe in the legend of the Marble King? It is not a legend. It is not a dream. It's true. See for yourself." On the floor, half raised on one elbow, the Greek saw the Marble King with his own eyes, lifted. My eyes blurred, his eyesight's blurred. He made his cross in front of him. He had claimed to experience it with his senses. The silence was almost thick, could be cut with a knife. The Turk spoke again. A few years ago, the Marble King was lying on the ground, but lately he has started to get up slowly. Let's go. They left no traces behind in their footprints. No one had seen them. They got in the car and took the road back. The river turns back, the Greek general monologue. It turns when God wants. He revealed the great secret to a specific trustworthy person who entrusted journalist Eli Kipraya with the information, naming the general under the watchful eye of God and the Virgin Mary icons. The general was reported to have fallen asleep in 2001, and the testimony was later confirmed by his sister Eleni. The latter also stated that her brother had seen an inscription above the head of the Marble King, which read, Ioannis. So that is what we are dealing with here. The Marble Emperor himself, who, much like the sleeper saints of Ephesus, who slept for 300 years, has been asleep for what has now been almost 800 years. And I think 800 would actually be a pretty perfect number in that regard. Much like so many of these things, again, the numbers almost work out perfectly. I mean, look at 1054. We're almost at exactly 1,000 years since the Great Schism. So again, this is just me talking out of my ass, but would it really be so crazy that what we're about to experience now at the beginning of this third world war, I mean, we might even go till the year 3000 if certain time interpretations are correct with this era of peace when orthodoxy grows and how things go. So that's how far we could be away, or 2054 could be when all of this goes down and the world actually, begins on that process towards actually ending. So the saints never give these exact dates and times because the scriptures say only the Father knows the hour. So that's what we're dealing with. But St. John, this is a real thick cultural thing, I guess, for anthropologists. This is a very thick Greek cultural thing in the sense that there are a lot of Greeks that definitely wouldn't even believe this and would dismiss this as silly and whatnot. But fundamentally, I think when you recognize and you go to Greece and you go to Russia and these places, the people that keep to these traditions, that follow the scriptures, that keep to the traditions that they've been taught, these are those Christians that you meet that have an impact on your life. These are people that you meet that they're a lot farther along in the spiritual path to meet. I feel the same way about Rasputin, for example, the veneration of Rasputin in Russia. It's a controversial subject. A lot of people would think it's ridiculous, even among certain church circles, much like talking about St. John Vatatsis and others is even controversial within the ecumenical patriarchate. In Russia, the Rasputin thing is controversial, but the people I met in Russia that did have positive opinions of venerate Rasputin, these were the most serious, ascetic, Orthodox, humble people that I met. And it's the same way in Greece and Cyprus when you meet the people that take these traditions and the words of Elder Ephraim and the words of it's a whole other world. And you got a glimpse of Jonathan talking to Ioannis, what his name is, who writes the books about John Vatatsis. You got a glimpse into the world of it's a whole. And of course you wouldn't know about it because the world wouldn't be spreading the word about this. This is a come and see moment, about orthodoxy. And I think when you realize that these traditions, and when you meet the people that keep these traditions, that's when I think it really all makes sense. And the doubts and the skepticism we have as Westerners start to go away.
Yeah, it is. And this is why, Orthodoxy is an experiential faith. It is not something that you can do online. It's not something you can do deep in a book. That only enriches your faith and gives you even more, appreciation for it. I know for, the challenge of our, whatever our future holds, regardless of what it is, it has this massive digital component and everything. This goes back to we're in a false reality. when we are participating in the liturgy, that is reality, and everything outside of that is not. And so in this world, in this false reality that we're in, with all the digital and all the everything else, um, it's purely distraction in one way, and then it's also pure opportunity to be able to showcase, what our faith is. And so, just as the digital tools, or whatever will be used for orthodoxy, every it has no will of its own, and it can be used for good or for evil. And that's where all of this, when you meet people who are obviously living in that reality of Christ, then it's easily recognized. And when I meet people like that, and they explain their faith, and they mention stories like this, and they say, this is real, it's undeniable.
Yeah, I mean, it's the true conclusion of, because I had a classical education, and one of the reasons I credit with why I maintained my faith through adolescence and college was I was inducted into worldview thinking. And if you are a worldview thinker, like a true worldview thinker is somebody that they might not even know about worldview philosophy and world thinking. It's a truly enculturated Orthodox person. It's something we talk about this all the time. Metropolitan Jovitos talks about it, how there is a genetic component to holiness, in the sense that your ancestors being holy will have an effect on you being holy. And so, look, I mean, so many of the saints in the church they had holy parents and families, and everyone can be a saint, but the crazy ascetics and those people that we have, those come from holy families. I mean, look at Saint Philomenos. He came from a deeply pious family in Cyprus, and even from him and his twin brother, they didn't even nurse on Wednesdays and Fridays, and they fled to the monastery at age 10 and 12. And it was, these sorts of things. This is where this stuff is coming from. This is, like, it looks crazy for two white Anglo guys from America talking about this. I get it, but we've met these people. We understand that, and Orthodoxy is a universal faith, and it's growing. And if it wasn't growing in America, maybe this would seem even sillier, but it is growing in America. And this is something that is going to become, this cultural reality is something that people, like I've saying it for years now. Well, specifically this past year, in 30 years where I live in Texas, the average person will know what Orthodoxy is for no other reason than there are going to be so many new churches that people will there will be one in their neighborhood. Almost within 30 minutes of where they live, there will be an Orthodox church. So this stuff is we are moving into as I've said, my part of the show, I describe it as worldwide re-enchantment. That's going to be something that occurs in the midst of this world war. I mean, we've talked about it on the show before, Jonathan. It's like an alchemical transmutation of the world mind. Like what happened in 1918 got us into this terrible place, and now that World War III is unfolding, we're exiting that and entering into a world of tradition and where the veil has been sort of pulled back. And that's both a good thing, because people will accept the reality of tradition and faith, but it's also a very dangerous thing, because there's delusion and demons and deception that will come into the world as well. £1.50 super sticker from Zoe J. Thank you. Not many people send the super stickers, so appreciate it. What do we have? $5 more. Pisces of EO. Jonathan, can we have an estimate when the third John the third book will be out?
I just like with prophecies and timelines, I hate giving them because they'll always be wrong. So I would love to say that I could have it out by the end of the month. I think that's feasible. I think it's possible, and I think it will be out by the end of the month. If you you can add your email to our newsletter on our website, you'll be the first to know. As soon as it's available, I'll send it out. I'll send it out to our website members. We have a membership group that's $30 a month, and we have Zooms. If I'll send it to them usually a couple of days prior, and then I'll send it to everybody on the newsletter, and then I'll let Conrad know, and I'll let Patrick know, and some of the other people who are interested in this kind of stuff, and I'm sure they'll put it out. And so you will know soon. I want to say by the end of the month. That is my goal, and then we'll see. But I appreciate your patience.
No, we're looking forward to it.
The translations and books and everything. Like I said, I'm software developer. I in simple, and my this is kind of a it was a curiosity that became its own passion, and also something that is just something amazing to be able to contribute to, and I hope it's helpful for people. I know it's been helpful for me, and I figured, well, someone else might want to read some of this, and if I can do some good with it, then hopefully that's what the church needs.
Well, you're doing the Lord's work. At least I think that's what we all at World War Now would view it as. And I think we've done a solid 2.5 hours. It's been a solid,
Yeah.
solid show. I think as we maybe start to land the plane here, I'd maybe like some of your thoughts just as we leave people with in the immediate future. If you have any thoughts on how this will develop, even at a low level, I'd be curious to your thoughts. Of course, as this was happening, big drone impact on the U.S. base in Iraqi Kurdistan and Erbil. So obviously the Kurdish question, I would say, I think Jonathan and I sort of came to an agreement. We're already both in agreement before the stream started that the next two things we're going to be looking for are going to be what's going to go on with the Kurds and what's going to happen with Erdogan. If you have anything you want to expand on that as we start to land the plane.
Well, probably the two larger things are if you have the ability to make yourself as independent as possible on absolutely everything, that's going to help. If you've got a family like I do, there's only so much you can do. I'm not going to be homesteading anytime soon. I don't live in the city, but I live close enough, and we have a life, and kids go to school, and there's still stuff going on. So, but I always like to have a system for everything that I need to be prepared for. And luckily that worked out for us when our electricity was off for 2 weeks, and having a system to heat, and then a way to cook and things like that. So those are some of the things I think about now a little more than I did. And then everything is going to cost more in the next couple months. Prices are going to rise because energy costs are going to rise, and that's going to affect a lot of people who have a tighter bottom line. And so that's something to be conscious of. There's and then with any type of new technology, AI, and the production or the ability to produce basically anything digitally almost immediately without human interaction. I've already I've already been involved in a lot of projects where everything was autonomously done, and so I would say that if you have the ability to create something useful and find a way to monetize it, that would be helpful for anyone, and the same goes for being aware of what's going on with AI and job layoffs and stuff like that. That's a really big concern of mine. The economic impact of new technology is a big concern. So we've got war going on. I'm not worried about getting drafted. There are certain things that are more of a concern than otherwise. And a lot of that has to do with the economics of being able to provide for a family, the simple stuff, making sure that we're able to attend liturgy and be responsible there and be more involved and balance the home life and church and everything else. So those are my concerns, and thinking about what to do and how to do it. Start simple and just I'd say get a really good prayer rule and keep it up. I've been really struggling with the fast this year, more than usual, and I've done a good job of keeping it. But everyone has their struggles and things that they'll go through, and so being able to be close with your spiritual father during any time is always helpful, but especially during times like this.
No, 100%. That's where we're at, and I think as we see these things unfold, we're gonna. Again, I wouldn't be surprised if 2026 was the last year of Erdogan. Maybe 2027. That's, I think, very much going to be in the cards here. So he's, and that's the thing. Like, this is, And that's how you understand. Like when I spoke to Metropolitan, people think, oh, this is, Greeks hate Erdogan, so that's why they talk about him dying in the prophecies. It's like you just don't. Yeah, there are stupid Greek people that cite Saint Paisios' prophecies and aren't spiritual and just use it for whatever. But I talked to Metropolitan Neophytos. He's like, guess what he said when I talk about Erdogan? He's like, well, Erdogan is actually Greek, and that's why he's so big. That's why he's great, because they view Erdogan as he's a great man of history, even if he has done terrible things to the Orthodox Church. And for better or for worse, he's somewhat of an independent actor and is able to restrain. He's a catechon in his own right, restraining, holding back this what's about to happen. So when he goes, it is not a cause for rejoicing, even if he is a watermelon salesman at the end of the day. But we have $5 from Steven Serling. I've graduated with a BS in math, and I've had a crazy hard time finding a job. Many such cases. I know a lot of people having a hard time with
it's only going to get more difficult. And I can say this: if it's a job that uses a computer, I would say by this time next year there won't be a human doing it. And that kind of speed is not hyperbole. Right now, we have autonomous systems running an unbelievable amount of the world economy and everything taking place. And this is going to be an incredible, challenging time. And those are the real concerns, being able to provide for yourself, your family, and things like that. Even, all the stuff's going on here and there, and that's great, but you still have to pay the bills and figure it out. So yeah, there's a lot of that going on. And I don't think we're going to look at college or university or anything like that in the same way after all of this. I think it'll be surprising if they're using humans to do much of anything within the next 3 years, and that includes most surgeries are now done by robot. It's unbelievable the time that we're going into, and but this is a good time to band together with people that you love and trust, and figure something out. Always think outside of the box, even if you're using AI or using any other kind of tool. Think outside of the box of what is useful, and be useful.
It's a good way. If anybody has any final super chats or questions, send them here in the next minute or two. We are wrapping things up. Thank you all for tuning in. It's been a fantastic stream. Jonathan, thank you for joining us, obviously.
Thank you for inviting me.
I want to, of course, it's always, we'll be doing many streams. This is the third or fourth of many in the future. We will be longtime collaborators as the Third World War continues to unfold, undoubtedly. But worldwarnow.co, if you want to check everything out, please do so over here. Get access to all the Ether Hour content, all of our discussions, all of our previous discussions with Jonathan, all of my content when I've gone to the Donbass. I'll put the Eschaton Vigil up on screen here as well. Be sure to check out the Eschaton Vigil right here, eschatonvigil.org. Get this page. It will be pulled right up. You can scroll down. You get access to all the books. These are all right here. You get access to the membership program here, as he said, $30 a month. This is all, of course, linked down in the description below. So check all of that out. Not seeing any more super chats. If you want to support the show outside of course, the super chats themselves, once you're already behind the paywall and you want to keep contributing, be sure to check out the World War Now Buy Me a Coffee, where you can support the show, and you can do. You can get us behind there, worldwarnow.com, buymeacoffee.com. I always say worldwarnow.com/buymeacoffee. I wish that existed. Instead, we have buymeacoffee.com/worldwarnow. That's how you can contribute to the show. Of course, you know that the YouTube super chats, they do take a percentage. So if you want to just make a direct donation that takes a much smaller percentage of everybody, be sure to send it in at the Buy Me a Coffee. We've had some great fans that have supported on there. I want to thank Jonathan Kelly and Porphyrios Allen. He gave a huge, massive donation on the Buy Me a Coffee, over $2,000. He gave $2,026 to mark 2026. So huge thank you to him supporting the World War Now cause. And he didn't ask credit or anything in return. So thank you to him, because without that, I wouldn't be able to monitor the situation as much as we do and keep everything. So if I was flipping burgers at a job, we wouldn't be able to do the show. So thank you everybody for contributing. Any final words, any final plugs, any final message for everyone, Jonathan, before we sign off?
Thank you to everyone who's interested. Thank you to all the people who purchased the books. Thank you for all the stuff y'all are doing. Your amazing work, and hopefully this is helpful for people. And if you have any questions or anything else, feel free to send me an email, jtg@eschatonvigil.org, or reach out through the feedback form on the website. And glory to God for all things.
Yeah, I will. That email will be available. I saw some people wanting to ask about some bulk purchases, so we'll make sure everyone has all the relevant information. But with all that being said, thank you all for tuning in. You already know eschatonvigil.org, worldwarnow.co, buymeacoffee.com/World War Now. Like this stream. If you haven't already liked it, please like the stream and share it with anybody that might be interested. And with all of that, we will see you on the next one. God bless everybody.